I don't
sort of
like that
like the
role.
moderator in the election, that last debate, the teacher.
Yeah.
We should give Sarah a button so she could mute us.
I know.
She has one.
She has that button.
He has that power.
I have
Right.
that power. I've never needed to use it. I welcome your
Okay,
comments.
so we are live on YouTube.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the October 27th, 2020 public hearing meeting of the New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission. I will call the roll. Chair Carroll,
Here.
Commissioner Bland,
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Here.
Commissioner Chapin,
Here.
Commissioner Chen,
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Here.
Commissioner Letfi, who is on mute,
Here.
okay, and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
Okay, all set.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the October 27th public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. Our meeting today is conducted via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube. If you wish to watch the hearing, please tune into YouTube from the LPC page. And if you would like to testify on a hearing item, please join the Zoom meeting at the estimated time for that item listed on our public hearing agenda. And when we take testimony, we will start with those speakers who've signed up in advance and take all other speakers who are in the meeting. We'll also display the information to join the meeting at the beginning of the testimony portion of the hearing. We'll be starting today with our public hearing agenda, which are items that are being presented for the first time. And then this afternoon, we will be reviewing public meeting items, which are items which have already had a public hearing and are back today in response to comments made by the commissioners after listening to the presentation and the public testimony at the hearing. And so we'll conclude the day with those revised proposals. And with that, I will turn it over to Caroline Kane-Levy, our Deputy Director in Preservation, to lead us through our agenda. Thank you.
Good morning. Item number 1 on the preservation public hearing agenda is docket number 21-02469, 25-10 Court Square, the New York State Supreme Courthouse individual landmark, Borough of Queens, Block 83, Lot 1. This is an application for an advisory report. A neo-English Renaissance-style courthouse designed by Peter M. Coco and built in 1904 to 05. And the application is to redesign the plaza.
Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. Please click on the presentation to resume control and state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Okay, I'm Brian Cantwell. I'm with the New York City Parks. Okay, are we ready to start? Okay, so again, I'll be presenting Court Square Park. This is located in Long Island City in front of the courthouse just off of Jackson Avenue. Okay, so this on the left you can see is a view of the courthouse along with the plaza in front of the courthouse that was reconstructed in 1989. There's currently a large fountain right on axis with the courthouse that's set in this circular plaza with red granite, small granite pavers and red granite seat walls around it. On the right is a view the opposite direction from the courthouse steps looking towards Jackson Avenue. You can again see the fountain that's on axis. On the left is the plaza directly in front of the courthouse. It's a large open plaza with concrete pavers that were installed in the 1989 reconstruction. And on the right, you can see this is a view of the sidewalk along Court Square West, again with the same concrete pavers. These concrete pavers actually go all around the entire block of the courthouse. This is a more detailed view of the fountain. On the left, you can see the plaza with the granite pavers. On the right, you can see a more detailed view of the fountain itself. It is in poor condition with a lot of corrosion. There are cracks in the basin, and it does not hold water. It does not really function anymore. And a detailed view of the pavers around the sidewalk. There's also a bluestone band that runs around the border. This bluestone band is not held up very well at all. A lot of it's filled in with asphalt now. A lot of other areas is cracked and eroding. Just quickly, the surrounding land use is mostly commercial and industrial with rapidly increasing amounts of residential in the area. And the neighborhood context, really, just looking at parks in the neighborhood, there's only one park within walking distance. So these are aerial photos. On the left from 1924, you can see the original triangular shaped park in front of the courthouse. This park was bisected by Thompson Avenue. The middle one in 1951, you can see it remains pretty much unchanged. And then on the right is a current aerial view. You can see that Thompson Avenue has been rerouted and the park has become a larger rectangular landscaped area in front of the courthouse. Just looking at the diagrams of the history, on the left, the original site plan, there was a circular plaza with a fountain off axis on this plan to the left of the courthouse. In the 1989 reconstruction, these parcels were combined, and there's a circular plaza in front of the courthouse with a fountain. And then on the right is the proposed diagram, which we will get into detail with the presentation. On the left, this is a view of the original courthouse built in 1872, which burned down in 1904 and then was reconstructed. On the right, you can see the reconstructed courthouse with the triangular landscaped park in front. And you can see the smaller fountain off axis to the courthouse and a small pipe rail fence around the landscaped area. And this is the courthouse as it exists today with the fountain and the circular plaza in front. This is a diagram showing the jurisdiction. The landmarked area was never updated when the parcels were combined. So the landmark jurisdiction is still the triangular shape in front, and the other piece of it is currently being reviewed by the Public Design Commission. So the existing conditions, we've covered a lot of it, but we have the circular plaza in front of the courthouse with the fountain and the kind of large open plaza directly in front of the courthouse that has the pavers that run around the perimeter, the entire block also. In the center, there are a lot of very nice mature shade trees. And then there is a bus shelter on the sidewalk at Jackson Avenue. The site analysis, the one thing to note here that we have to be aware of in the design is there is a large amount of pedestrian traffic, especially during commute hours, crossing the site, coming from the corner of Court Square West and Jackson Avenue from the subway exit. Then they cross either across down Jackson Avenue and across the site, or down Court Square West and through the plaza in front of the courthouse, and currently are also crossing between the trees through the lawn as a shortcut. The tree inventory, we are maintaining most of the large canopy trees. We're trying to maintain everything that's in good condition. We're removing some for removals. There are some smaller trees that we're removing that were put in recently that are really not in keeping with the design. And there is one existing tree that we will be removing. We had a meeting to kick off the design to get input from the community. We had pretty large turnout, and we took that and prioritized their wish list items. The largest thing was demand or a wish for more plantings and more green space in the park. They also wanted more seating options. They wanted a design that was in keeping with the courthouse. They had interest in a fountain when they realized that fountain is actually a modern fountain that was installed in 1989. What they really seemed to want, they came back with, was wanting a spray feature that the neighborhood children could play in. They also wanted to keep a space for walking dogs and then a large flexible space for community events. Again, this is the existing conditions plan. And then we go to the proposed design. So the proposed design creates a large central lawn area directly in front of the courthouse with an oval path around it, which will be lined with benches. There will be two new entrances to the park off of Jackson Avenue, opening that up. There's be a new seating area plaza just off of Thompson Avenue that provides a new entrance into the park. It'll have bistro tables and chairs and new shade trees. On the opposite side, on the left side of the central lawn area, there's a smaller new seating area with game tables and chairs that will be under the mature shade trees. And then at the bottom tip of the lawn will be the new water feature that will be designed to allow the children to play in. Directly in front of the courthouse, we are reconstructing the existing plaza, but it will remain mostly the same. We are replacing the concrete pavers in kind. The plaza will be lined with new benches and new lighting along the perimeter. The one thing to note is the existing bluestone bands, because they did not hold up well, we will be replacing with concrete, colored concrete to match the bluestone. Next, so this is just looking at how the new design works with the pedestrian circulation crossing the site. So the new entrances off of Jackson Avenue are designed to ease the pedestrian traffic across, where they can cross into the site and through the new plaza off of Thompson Avenue. They can also continue the way they always have down Court Square West and through the plaza in front of the courthouse. So this is a rendering. This is a bird's eye view looking at the new central lawn area and the new oval path. Off to the left, you can see the new seating area off of Jackson Avenue. And then at the tip of the lawn area is the new water feature. This is a view looking from Jackson Avenue towards the courthouse. You see the central lawn area. You also see the oval path, which would be done in Landmark's gray concrete, so that it's a little bit more subdued. It blends in with the landscape a little better and does not distract from the view of the courthouse. This is a view the opposite direction from the courthouse steps, looking towards Jackson Avenue. You can see the plaza in front of the courthouse, along with the new water feature and the central lawn. And a view of the seating area off of Thompson Avenue. Again, the materials, we are using standard parks materials, the 1939 World's Fair bench, our game table with the benches to match. We're using the fixed bistro tables and chairs in the plaza off of Thompson Avenue. We'll have new parks lighting, the type B lighting. For materials, we're using the light gray concrete pavers to match what's there now. Like I said, the bluestone bands we will be replacing with concrete bands and with a dark gray color similar to the bluestone, and traditional concrete, Landmarks grade concrete. Around the central lawn, we're proposing using the post and chain fence to help maintain the lawn, to keep people from being able to cut directly across. It will still be open in location so people can use the lawn. And then we are proposing a 2'6" pipe rail fence around the perimeter of the site. All the entrances will be open, but it will be around the landscape area to keep people from being able to cut through. And then on the right is the new water feature that we're proposing. This is the fencing diagram. So in the orange around the perimeter would be that new 2'6" pipe rail fence. And then just the post and chain fence around that central lawn area. For planting, we are using additional pin oaks, which is what is there, along with some hawthorns to provide smaller shade trees, and then shrubs, which would be behind the benches around the oval lawn. And that is it for the presentation.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. So just commissioners, to be clear, when the original courthouse was built, it was on a lot that had a triangular front court as the street went through. That original courthouse burned in a fire, and the current courthouse, which is a landmark, replaced it. And at that time, that street continued to cut through. And so from the original time, the courthouse and its replacement always had a triangular shaped courtyard in front of it. And therefore, when the commission landmarked the courthouse and they landmarked its lot, it included the triangular courtyard. In 1989, this commission approved a report to allow for the redesign of that courtyard, which included squaring it off to reconfigure it to meet the new street plan. And so in this application, you'll see the landmark site kind of diagonally cuts through the courtyard. The Public Design Commission is binding, as it's a city property and a park and a fountain, and with a significant portion of it undesignated. So they are binding, and we are advisory because a portion of that redesign is on the landmark site. And I think as the applicant presented, there is no original fabric from the original design. We saw in the photographs in the original design, there was a lawn with some lampposts. And then with the second courthouse, the current courthouse, there was an off-access fountain. And then again in 1989, the commission approved redesigning it. So everything that's there today dates to that 1989 approval. So we're going to see if we have some questions. I see Commissioner Chapin does. So please go ahead, and Commissioner Chapin, and we'll see if anyone else has questions as well.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Yeah, I was very interested in the fountain. I couldn't find any history on it, and I see why. But anyway, I was curious about what happened to the older fountain. I assume no one has any idea. And about the current design, I was wondering about the choice of the position for the water feature, why you chose to put it at the courthouse end rather than at the other end. The other comment I had was that one might have to in the future begin to look at a redesign of chess table seating in the current environment. So anyway, of how you use the seating for chess tables. But anyway, so if you could address particularly the water feature, I'd appreciate that. And if there is anything you know about that earlier fountain, either you or the staff, I'd be interested.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, I know nothing about what happened with the original fountain, but the location for the new water feature really has to do with One is we have a very large open space in front of the courthouse. We have the large open plaza, and we are trying to activate that. It's really an unused space. Other than people crossing it to go across the site. We do need that space, I think, visually as a setting for the courthouse as a large mass, and you need that space. But other than that, it's really an unused space. And with the idea that children are going to be playing in the fountain, we really want it away from Jackson Avenue. So we don't want it too close to the street. So that to us seemed like the ideal location.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Jefferson, please. Oh, no, sorry, Commissioner Goldblum and then Commissioner Jefferson. Apologize.
Just a quick curiosity question. How do you deal with ADA on those fixed seats for the tables?
So two of the seats actually don't have a bench on one side so that a wheelchair can come up. So two are ADA accessible, two are not.
Okay, and Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. You'll just have to unmute yourself. Yeah. Commissioner Jefferson, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have a hard time going back and forth. And the issue here, the question I have is you decided to go to an oval as your dominant shape instead of a circle that you had originally. And the question is, the oval is much more dynamic than the circle. So what made you decide to change the figure?
Really, it's a functional decision. The oval, well, there's a lot of mature shade trees on the site. There was an open space in the center. And so one of the big things that the community wanted was a usable neighborhood park. And so by creating the oval, we were able to create the largest possible open lawn space in front of the courthouse. If we had stuck with a circle, we really end up dividing the space more, and we can't make that bigger because of the existing trees on the site.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if it maybe also helps, when we issued the report in 1989 for the current design, the commission findings talked about the new fountain being on access with the courthouse, but it didn't otherwise talk about the geometries that were approved. It sort of talked about the materials and the benches and the light posts being appropriate, but no specific findings about the geometries when we approved the current design. Okay, other questions? Okay, I think we are good. And we don't have any questions at this time, so we'll turn to public testimony. So I will turn it over to Lisa Kersavage to walk us through the testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And we will start with anyone who signed up in advance.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. We have two people that signed up. I'm going to start with Kelly Carroll. And Kelly, I've brought you in.
Good morning, Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. The historic site plan of Court Square was compromised by the closure of Thompson Avenue in the 90s, and the subsequent realignment of a formal square was created. At that time, HDC understands that a historic fountain was not present, but that a fountain resembling a historic condition was incorporated into the site, which is what currently exists today. The present fountain is adorned in a classical vocabulary reflective of the courthouse, and it has an axial relationship to the landmark. In examining historic photographs, this site has had a similar fountain throughout most of its history, including a presence in front of the 1874 building before the fire. To this end, HDC asks that this historicized fountain remain on site and in alignment with the formal axis with the landmark. Dry fountains evoke neglect and blight, so we ask that it be retained in a working order. The proposed spray fountain will require similar maintenance, so we don't view the reincarnation of the existing fountain as a heavy lift. Removing this fountain is an aesthetic severance between the park and the landmark, as they share a stylistic dialogue. Please keep it here. In the existing park plan, there is a desire path that was paved over because of how heavily the east side of the park is traversed. Thompson Avenue originally ran diagonally here, essentially on the same path. This is why it still makes sense for pedestrians to cut the corner in this location to reach Jackson Avenue more efficiently. HDC is unconvinced that the proposed park plan will do anything to fix this problem of the lost street, and we fear that its failure will result in more maintenance issues. Finally, HDC is concerned about the proposed lawn area's maintenance inside the oval, and we wish to ensure it will be and will remain real grass and not plastic. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Jeremy Woodall. And Jeremy, I've brought you in. And you just need to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you choose. Okay, Jeremy, I'm going to make a request that you unmute yourself, see if that works. There you go.
How's that?
That's good. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jeremy Woodoff and will speak for myself and not my city employer, the Department of Design and Construction, which is not involved in this project. I was the LPC Preservation Department staff member who presented the current 1989 design at the public hearing. Also, twice each workday for the last 20 years, I walked through the square on the way to and from my DDC office. The current location of the fountain and the fountain itself are not historic, but an ornamental fountain like this one has been on the site since the 1870s, continuing at least into the 1930s and likely 1950s. Given its long presence and the prototypical nature of such fountains on courthouse squares, its removal should not be undertaken lightly. In my view, history dictates that it should stay on the site as a working fountain, even if relocated. But I want to focus on a more fundamental issue. The 1989 enlargement of the square made possible by relocating Thompson Avenue was seen by everyone at the time as an opportunity to create a formal classical square with a strong axis focusing on the courthouse. In my view, this turned out to be a mistake, and the current Parks Department proposal doesn't do enough to solve the problems this design created. The design fights its surrounding urban context, the buildings, street patterns, and especially pedestrian use. The result has been a degradation of the landscape since the beginning, with pedestrians entering the square where they will, and then traversing the lawns and plantings every which way. The great formal axis is virtually never used by pedestrians and is little appreciated visually. The proposed design minimally and unsuccessfully addresses these deficiencies. I believe the only way a formal design can work here is if it were in the tradition of an urban piazza and mostly paved. With the desire to maintain a more park-like space, I suggest the formal design be scrapped in favor of one that reflects the square's use as a pedestrian circulation hub, as well as a neighborhood park and gathering place. The landscape fronting this classical neo-Renaissance building need not itself be formal. There are other approaches, including the picturesque, that would allow plantings and pedestrian paths to go where they need to, and would accommodate ornaments such as the fountain. Most importantly, a landscape better attuned to its uses and context will be maintainable and will not so easily fall into disrepair, becoming a degraded setting for the magnificent courthouse. Finally, I request that the Commission explain the calendaring of this project for an advisory rather than a binding report. The Landmarks Law and City Charter are clear in directing the Commission to issue binding reports for all projects on city-owned landmark sites, with only two exceptions, for some work in scenic landmarks and for works of art. The Commission should use the authority it has to maximize its influence over the design of this important and historic civic space, purposefully included within the landmark site and adjacent to one of the most significant individual landmarks in Queens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands raised to speak. So I think any of the testimony.
Okay, thank you. Rich, do we have any written testimony?
We do. We have a resolution from Community Board 2 recommending approval, and another letter from the Court Square Civic Association addressing concern with the fountain.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Cantwell, would you like to respond to the comments?
Sure. I can respond to some of them. Again, the fountain, like we discussed, is not, the current fountain is not historic and has fallen into disrepair. And has not been easy for parks to maintain. The water feature that children play in was wanted by the community, and is something that we use throughout a lot of our parks. So it's something that we are able to easily maintain. For circulation, we have opened it up entrances to make circulation through the park much easier, along with the historic pipe rail fence around the perimeter to keep people from crossing through the site where it's not wanted. We believe we've listened to the community and their needs, and we've, feel like within the constraints of the site, we've are hopefully meeting their requests.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions?
This is Sybil Young. From Parks, can I just add one thing? Another thing that we looked at when analyzing this site and starting design was how the 1989 fountain, when it was placed on access there and due to its size, just really how it blocks views to the landmark courthouse. And we did think about that in opening up those views and putting just a smaller water feature, and think that the new design really highlights what is the individual landmark. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioners, any final questions? Okay, so I think we'll move to close the hearing. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I second the motion. I had one question and I put it in, but it didn't go across. I mean, you can't maintain the fountain in New York City. What's the issue? You fix it, repair it. Why is that a difficult thing?
So part of it has to do with the infrastructure required for the fountain. It requires a large pumps, circulation, recirculation of the water, and that has not historically been maintained.
I second the motion.
Okay. All right, all in favor of closing the hearing, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And I think, again, as I stated, we are advisory because the Public Design Commission is looking at the entire park. A large portion of it is off the landmark site, and we're looking at it because some portion of this design is on the landmark site. And as we also was stated that, the original design with the 1876 courthouse was more of a lawn than the design in front of the current courthouse had a fountain and was more formal, but the fountain was off center. And in both cases, it was a triangular shaped, it was sort of just the lot in front of the courthouse. And the current design dates to 1989. And I think maybe for the purposes of the discussion, can we go back to the slide that has the three images of the original 1951 and 1989? I wish we had a, well, actually, yeah, that could, yeah. Maybe the, let's go back to the photos, actually, that might help inform the discussion. The photos of the historic photos, I mean, so we can sort of base our comments on historic basis. Okay. So why don't we go ahead and start our discussion? Commissioner Chapin, would you like to start with this one?
Yeah, I had initially a great deal of concern about the fountain, actually. And yes, Commissioner Jefferson, one should be able to maintain fountains. Obviously, the Parks Department has a very large number of properties, and sometimes particularly historic features have had issues in terms of maintenance. As someone who spent a lot of time at parks, both and was involved in both capital projects and also the preservation of historic features. Looking at this, so I'm going to put that to the side because if nothing else, the fountain could be retained as, let's say, a planter or something and not have to have an infrastructure even. But listening to the presentation and discussion, I feel that in this particular case, the fountain is not historic. And while, as Jeremy Woodruff commented, it did create a dialogue, which is important and really rather nice. At the same time, removing it does present the opportunity for a really improved view corridor to the historic landmark. So balancing one against the other and looking at the fact this is not a historic fountain, I feel that I could approve it, though I equally would have been very happy with something like a similar fountain feature in the center. So I think I could approve removal of the fountain, which is not really before us as a specific item, but that was my largest concern. With regard to the general design of the open space, I think it improves the circulation, and I think the use of the pipe rail fence and the larger paved area to walk around direct traffic away from desire lines and around the circle or oval in this case will probably work much better. And it is true, a great need for open space in this community, this general area. And the water feature is relatively, it's not going to draw a lot of attention to itself as a flat feature in the landscape. So I think I can approve it as presented, though I did have some concerns about it, but I think I can approve it.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
It's a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. I think that the change of the site layout to an oval is appropriate, given that the current layout is not particularly historic, and that the oval is appropriate to this style of building. I think that the choices about paving and the other features are also appropriate. They're standard. I think that the basis for making a lot of the decisions was understandable and doesn't conflict with the landmark in any way. To the issue of the fountain, though, I do agree that it's okay to remove this fountain, which is from the 1980s. However, I think that the presence of a kind of vertical marker, an accent of some kind, seems to date to the renovation of the courthouse after the fire burned down the first one. Whether the fountain, I don't think this particular fountain is necessary, but I think that a vertical element of some interest is clearly something that people desire and is clearly something they associate with this courthouse. So I would request that the applicants either relocate this one in a non-functional way, or find a different element that can be integrated, or even a new design element associated with their fountain that would somehow recall the original one, or maybe there's a fragment that's historic to and relevant to Queens that could be placed here. I don't know. I don't think that the particular item is as important as the presence of a visual accent that relates to the building in a very classic Beaux-Arts way. I think that would be a good idea.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
I agree with Commissioner Goldblum about the fountain, the fixture. If you look at the 1934 image, there actually is, I don't know where the present fountain came from. It actually looks like it's an artifact from somewhere. And it could be that in the 1934 photograph, that thing in the foreground is that very same fixture. And so I would ask the applicant to confer with the staff and see if that, not the entire fountain, but at least that the fountain fixture itself could be reused somewhere on the site in a possibly in a benign way, retaining that element. As far as the other features and the layout, given that there are really no green spaces, no nearby green spaces for the community, I think the fact that there was community input in the design of this thing is relatively admirable, and thus I can find it approvable.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I agree with the commissioners, especially Commissioner Devonshire, that the fact that the Parks Department went and seek the community input and the desire for green space, as he just mentioned, is absolutely right on the point, because we all pass through this square area and we all know that the lack of green space, and now that there's a lot more residential, obviously with the it would have been nice with Commissioner Goldblum's point about an accent so that to reflect the earlier element of the fountain would be nice. But I do find in general this is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
Thank you. I appreciated both who testified. I thought the testimony was right from the heart and the brain. But in the end, I found it unpersuasive, ultimately. I think we seem to be out of the era of circles. Maybe that was the 80s, Beaux-Arts or something, I don't know. And into the era of ovals. They seem to be quite popular. And I think for good reasons. Regarding the fountain, I'm very familiar with the success of the similar fountain at the Brooklyn Museum, and to see the human activity, mostly children activity, in that fountain is a sight to behold, and it's a wonderful way of enlivening our parks. And I think actually it's kind of an appropriate thing and a wonderful thing to think that people going up those steps into the courthouse for what might not be a very happy reason to be there, to pass through a bunch of kids playing actively playing in a park might be just kind of a wonderful thing and an appropriate dichotomy, perhaps appropriate to our times of opposites. In any event, I think the scheme is quite wonderful. I also applaud the neighbors for joining in what seems to be a successful charrette, giving their input, and I think Parks Department has listened to that input and has incorporated the scheme. Regarding any sort of a fountain, that fountain, I see no reason that one needs to pass by a fake version of an earlier historic fountain on their way into the courthouse, and I see no reason that we need to mark that extraordinary symmetry and beautiful architecture of the existing courthouse. It does its own centering without furthering. So anyway, those are my thoughts, and I accept the design and applaud the design as given.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
I also found both the testimony and the presentation to be very interesting, and I truly appreciate what the site was at various points in history, and I also appreciate where we are today in terms of this neighborhood and what the Parks Department is trying to do in terms of trying to meet the needs of the community that wants, and I'm glad to hear has had input in what this park would be. I think the scheme is very successful. I like the switch from the circular lawn to the oval lawn. I do think it's more dynamic, and I think it would be wonderful to see people from the neighborhood hanging out on that lawn and around that lawn. I think the Parks Department has done a good job of, after hearing what some of the problems were with people traversing the park, I think that in the design, the Parks Department has done a good job in terms of trying to, with the poles and the chains, guide people through the park in a way so that it will be used as designed. I also love the water feature and agree with Fred about what's happening at the Brooklyn Museum, which is just wonderful. And I don't see the need to put a marker in the middle of the lawn either. One thing I would like to point out for the Parks Department to think about is that in both of the earlier, if we could just go back to the early slide of the two buildings historically. Side by side. Okay. One thing that's going on here that's important is, especially since this is a landmark building, is there is this wonderful view corridor to the buildings that doesn't get obstructed, whether there's a fountain there or not. In 1934, it's because whatever greenery is there is very low, and I mean, it's a little naked in the 1872 to 1904, but you get to see the buildings. So on page 13 in the current courthouse 2020, what's going on is not only does the fountain obscure the view, but so do a lot of the trees. And then when you move forward to the design, today's design, which I believe, I don't know what page that is, but 23. Although we've opened up the view corridor by eliminating the fountain, the trees are kind of getting in the way a little bit. If there's some way to just like maybe move those front trees back a little bit or something so that you actually do get to, I realize in the winter, there are no leaves on the trees, but so that you do get a chance to really see the building when you're in the park and passing by. And I think as long as you're making this change and you're concerned about the view corridor, I would, take a look at it relative to some of the plantings.
Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson?
I need to open this up. I agree with the comments of the commissioners. There's only one issue for me, is that the oval shape is a very beautiful shape, and edges of oval are, defining them is important. And I think it's unfortunate to me that they're cutting in to the end of the axis of the oval to put the water feature. I think it's nice to have a water feature. I think it's great. But I think formally it takes away from the oval. That's my only comment.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Gustafson?
I agree with Commissioner Lutfi and the applicant about the view corridor to the individual landmark. In its original incarnation and its subsequent incarnation, we got a wonderful view of the courthouse as an imposing structure. And indeed, I think if you go around the boroughs, you'll see that the courthouses are all situated and designed to give that give you that imposing view. So I am not. I think I'm in support of this plan. I think that it doesn't detract from the individual landmark, and it in fact enhances it. And then finally, I just want to thank Mr. Cantwell for a very efficient and thorough presentation. As always, the Commissioner Braddock's team is a fountain of information.
Check. Okay, Commissioner Shamir Barron.
I'm supportive of the expansion and reconsideration of the site, circle to oval, but I must say that I don't understand this idea of sort of unused, the kind of the problem as it's been described with unused public space. There's something that misses the point about what Piazza's big public spaces actually are, which are unprogrammed, but certainly used in that the generosity of the open space is collectively shared. And so I don't understand this need to program that. And so to that extent, the kind of the greening of the oval and the putting the actual fountains and kid splash areas inside of that oval, and then further closing off the oval with a little rail that makes it look like a dog park makes no sense to me. So I would say, it would be so much more interesting in my mind, if it was simply open so that people, and potentially with some seating or something, some way for people to stop for a moment, but fully open. And if green, then not enclosed with a rail. And I think that the splash area should be in another sweet spot, but not necessarily in the central oval. So there are a number of things here that, while overall, I think that this is an important thing to be kind of redesigned, reconsidered. And I don't understand the elements as well as they've been described. They don't make sense to me within the context of true public use.
You, Commissioner Holford Smith.
Well, I think I'm in agreement with a lot of comments that have already been made. I was especially pleased to see that there was community input into the design of the park, which I think is really an important step. I initially was troubled by the location of the spray shower and thought it didn't seem appropriate. And I think I'm coming around to thinking that maybe the location of it is the problem, like Adi just said. It's in a very prominent location, and perhaps finishing the oval as a green space and having the spray shower perhaps to the side in lieu of some of the tables might be more appropriate. But in general, I'm in support of the major moves of the plan.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you, commissioners, for all of your comments. And I think since we are advisory, we will issue a report that is largely supportive, I think, based on what I've heard with, and in that report, we will note some of the comments made by commissioners. So I'll go ahead and make that motion now. And here we go. In the matter of docket number 21-02469, 25-10 Court Square, New York State Supreme Courthouse, an individual landmark, a neo-English Renaissance style courthouse designed by Peter M. Coco and built in 1904 to 05. This is an application to redesign the plaza. And I note that the footprint of the park was expanded from a triangle to a square in the mid 20th century by demapping a portion of the adjoining roadway, which is outside of the designated site, and converting it to parkland. That except for a possibly small section of bluestone, all of the existing paving or furnishings, including the fountain, are modern, and that approximately 1/3 of the park is outside of the designated individual landmark. I actually think it might be a little bit more than that. Okay, I recommend the commission issue a favorable report finding that the proposed modifications to this park, which has been redesigned and expanded over time, will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the replacement of the relatively tall fountain with a simple designed at-grade water feature will eliminate a modern furnishing which partially obstructs a prominent view of the courthouse, that the simplicity and symmetry of the park redesign and axial alignment with the courthouse will relate to the neo-English Renaissance style of the courthouse without drawing undue attention to itself, that all of the site furnishings will either be simple in design or based upon designs of typical early 20th century site furnishings for plazas and parks associated with civic buildings, that the proposed paving will feature scoring and banding patterns which will maintain alignments with the footprint of the courthouse and will match existing paving surrounding the courthouse in terms of material, thereby supporting the unity of the site, that the small light gray cast concrete pavers close to the courthouse and dark gray poured concrete paving surrounding the lawn will help to subtly reflect the identity of the site as parkland while also maintaining visual clues to the primacy of the courthouse, and that the proposed work will support the significant historic and architectural character of the courthouse and its site. I also note that many commissioners supported the idea of opening up the views to the courthouse and commented that further study could be done to achieve that goal, including looking at the plantings and the fences and the placement of those and the placement of the splash feature. And that some commissioners also felt that a vertical element that had a relationship to the Beaux-Arts design of the building should be retained, and that would recall a fountain or other vertical element that would relate to the Beaux-Arts style should be maintained. Okay, Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
No.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion carries.
Approved. We will be issuing our advisory report to the Design Commission, and we'll move to the next item now.
Next item is item number 2, docket number 20-10228, 81 Horatio Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, Borough of Manhattan, Block 643, Lot 70. The application is for a certificate of appropriateness, a row house designed by William Grant and built in 1870, and the application is to replace windows.
The applicant has joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Please state your name for the record and click to activate the screen, and you may begin.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Hello. My name is Sean Arrowsmith. I am the architect of record for 81 Horatio Street. As was previously stated, I've had to advance the slide here 1 second. 81 Horatio is on the north side of Horatio Street between Washington and Greenwich in Manhattan. We are seeking to replace all of the street facade windows on the building. The only significant change to the windows, the reason for replacement, is the function of the window to increase the acoustic and energy performance. There will be no change to the sizing, the layout, the materials, or the color of the windows. The existing windows are modern windows that were replaced about 10 years ago. Looking at the tax lot photos, you can see from 1980 and 1940 that the original windows were a 6/6 double hung window. That still exists today. The current windows are also 6/6. You can also see from these photos that there is a companion building next door at 79 Horatio Street. If we move on to, this is the existing conditions of 81 Horatio. And you can see the detailed shots of the existing windows, which again are not the original windows. These are modern replacements. They are Marvin Ultimate double hung windows. They are a wood window. We will be replacing them, or are proposing to replace them with a matching wood window that will be not double hung, but full height tilt and turn. Again, from this photo, it's only to illustrate the companion building at 79 Horatio Street on the right and 81 Horatio Street, which is the property in question, on the left. I'm going to run through the plans fairly quickly. The major point here is we are replacing all windows on the street facade of the building. There are no changes proposed to the existing masonry or other facade elements of the building. Again, the existing color of the windows is Benjamin Moore Dove White, which you can see in the top left there. On the bottom of the page, on the left, is a typical elevation of the existing 6/6 double hung window. On the right is the proposed elevation, a typical elevation of a simulated 6/6 double hung window that is in fact a full height tilt and turn. These are the details. The existing windows are shown on the left. The proposed windows are shown on the right. The dimension of the window is changing slightly. The existing is 12 3/16, and that will be going up slightly to 12 7/16 in section. In plan, there is no change to the visible glazing of the window. Also, the proposed window has even though it is tilt and turn, it has a offset glazing plane to simulate the shadow line and play of light across a double hung window. It is also a wood window that will be painted in the same dove white color. There are no changes to the brick molding or other casement details beyond that. And then these are photos provided by the window manufacturer of their typical window system. This is the window that will be in a modified version used on our project. Obviously, the color is not the color we are discussing, and the window layout will be modified per our design elevation. Again, the interest of replacing the window is primarily for acoustics and energy performance. A full height tilt and turn has a more positive enclosure using compression gaskets. The gasket gets squeezed when the window is in closed position, whereas a double hung, though it can lock, relies on a less secure brush gasket or some other form of sealant. And that's our presentation.
Thank you. And I think we have some questions. Commissioner Goldblum, please go ahead.
Thanks. So the commission has in the past approved for net zero or highly energy efficient houses the use of a faux double hung window where the lower sash operates as a hopper or casement and the upper sash is fixed. Did you explore using something like that?
We have looked at, we worked with a manufacturer on a fixed upper and lower tilt and turn, which would be similar to a hopper or casement window. The issue is that it creates more area. The acoustic performance and actually the energy performance, which tend to go hand in hand, is actually in fact lower for a half and half of that nature. The full height tilt and turn has larger, more continuous gasketing and cleaner edges. And for that reason has a higher performance. In fact, the half and half window that we developed with the same manufacturer, it required a triple glazed unit to achieve the same energy and acoustic performance that this window that they're currently proposing achieves.
And is this house going to be a passive house or some other recognized level of energy performance?
At this time, we are only proposing a window replacement. I can't speak to any future plans for increasing energy efficiency. Again, it is primarily due to the poor quality, even though it is a Marvin Ultimate window, which is considered to be a high-end window. The existing windows have become a problem, both acoustically and from air leakage energy performance.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, why don't we move to public testimony? If there's anyone in the meeting who would like to speak, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Lisa to see if we have anyone who signed up to speak. Lisa? Okay, we can't hear you, but I think I did get that we don't have anyone signed up to speak, and I don't see any hands raised. So I think we don't have anyone here who would like to speak on it. And Rich, can you let us know if there's any written testimony?
Yes. Sorry, hold on one second. My computer here is acting odd. So we do have a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 2, which recommended denial of the application based on the windows, and we do have a letter from GVSHP also in opposition to the application.
Okay, thank you. All right, and I will, we do have a few more questions. So let me go to the questions and we can continue to ask the applicant about their proposal. Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead and just accept the request to unmute yourself. So Commissioner Jefferson, you just have to unmute.
Sorry about that. The issue is a technical issue with the glass. The muttons, the pieces, are they glued onto the glass, or are they each piece of glass is set in a wood frame in this system?
They are applied muttons.
The
existing window is a Marvin window that also has applied muttons. So it would be matching the existing window in that manner.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions?
If I may, I'm not sure if it made it on the agenda, but I do have a statement from the owner. Is it appropriate if I read that?
Absolutely, you may read it.
Thank you. So this is in the words of the owner. Landmark Commission. My wife Gabriella and I have 5 children and have been residents of the West Village for 10 years. Gabby even longer, as she lived in the West Village before we met. I was born and raised in New York. I say this to emphasize the respect we have for the city and its historic significance. It is with this respect that we ask the Landmark Commission to accept our request to replace the windows on the Horatio Street side of our brownstone home. We want to absolutely duplicate the exact size, shape, and look of the existing windows and their sister building at 79 Horatio did in their recent renovation. Our windows are at least 15 years old and are no longer functioning. The windows leak cold air, jam, and are not soundproof at all. As you may know, we border on the meatpacking district, and the area has become quite popular as a nighttime destination. We would like to replace the existing windows with exact replicas that are double paned, sealed against the cold, and are noise resistant. We will replace the existing windows with exact copies of our neighbors and landmark requirements so that from the street, the historical significance of the community is maintained. Thank you for considering our application. Best, Austin and Gabrielle Hurst.
Okay, thank you. All right, any final comment before we move to our discussion? Okay, so commissioners, we're going to make a motion to close the hearing now and begin our discussion. Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
I so motion.
Okay, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So as Commissioner Goldblum pointed out, the commission has many times approved windows that look like double hung windows with an upper sash that's fixed and a lower sash that operates in a tilt or casement. And so there's still two separate sashes, but they have that gasket that achieves that tight seal. And that window has been used in many passive house installations and so has met the requirements for passive house. This is, and the commission has approved it, finding that the slight tilt in the lower sash would create a shadow line that would not be inconsistent with a double hung appearance. So a window that fully tilts, I think, does have a different appearance that we should consider as we talk about this in our discussion. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you like to start?
Sure. This is a tough one for me. We have difficulty as a commission with the changing of the operation of a window like this because one sees windows in the open position and they're part of the design of the facade, no less so than the cornice or the stoop. So I think that our allowing for the faux double hung in the extraordinary case of a whole house renovation where they're upgrading the house to have much higher than normal energy efficiency is a concession to try to encourage that kind of hyper efficiency. Here, where that is not being done, and where the type of window is even more divergent in its operation than even that one, where the upper sash would in fact always remain fixed, seems to me to be a window too far for me to go. So I'd find this difficult to approve. And further, on a technical level, the applicant did say that the sound and the efficiency goals of the applicant could be met with a triple glazed window. But again, that's really not our, we're not here debating what energy standards one should or shouldn't attain, but whether the proposed window meets with the appropriateness standard. And I think that it doesn't. And I think this would be the slippery slope argument is always, people use that all the time for convenient purposes, but I think this would be an example of it being a slippery slope. I would say we shouldn't go there.
Commissioner Devonshire.
I would agree with that statement.
Commissioner Chen.
I have a question. In the past, has LPC ever approved in this context of tilt and turn windows?
We've not approved tilt and turn windows. We have approved a window that achieves the high performance that is similar to what they're trying to do here, in that but the top sash is fixed and the lower sash tilts so that it replicates, and in many cases we've allowed it when it's removing a non-historic window and restoring the historic appearance, where the top sash remains in the plane it would be in a double hung window and only the bottom sash tilts.
So in this case, I tend to agree with the two commissioners who just that, they brought up a good point, which is that in appearance, at least on the front facade, such a prominent facade, I do not know how much of when you on an open position, how much of that deviates from the original appearance.
Okay. And Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, I agree. This is inappropriate and should be denied. But the applicant has other options, which have been now stated 2 or 3 different times in our discussion. And I think they can pursue one of those other options for the same result. So I think this should be denied.
Commissioner Lutfi?
I happen to agree with my fellow commissioners. You know, this building is right on the street, and any change, the tilt and turn change, would be extremely obvious. I just think it's inappropriate, and I definitely think you can achieve both energy efficiency and sound attenuation with many, many windows, including Marvin windows, which I just installed, and dealt with both issues, and they're just perfect. So I'm sorry, I would have to deny.
Commissioner Jefferson?
I agree with fellow commissioners on this one.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Well, as you all know, I tend to take these situations very seriously, and I'm very vocal about them. But I'm starting to feel like I'm tilting at windows here. It's very easy for applicants to comply with other options, and in this case, their argument proves too much. You know, if indeed the tilt and turn in this style is more efficient than the double hung window, we're going to start seeing thousands of these across the city. So no.
Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I'm in agreement with the other comments.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith?
I'm in agreement.
And Commissioner Chapin? Commissioner Chapin? Commissioner Chapin? Okay, I think, well, we definitely have more than a consensus on this. I mean, we have more than 6 on this. We have more than a quorum on this. So as was stated, there are actually windows that do meet both energy and sound attenuation needs. And in fact, our rules have been amended to allow for that flexibility. And so I would recommend that we move to deny this application and ask the applicant to work on one of the many staff level options or come back to us with a different proposal. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you make the motion?
Sure. Regarding 81 Horatio Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, the application is to replace windows. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. And I recommend denial, finding that the operation and details of the proposed full-height tilt and turn windows do not sufficiently recall the appearance of the building's historic double-hung windows and are not in keeping with replacement windows typically found at buildings of this type, style, and age, that the building's small scale and the presence of double hung windows at the adjacent building, matching building, will call undue attention to the change in operation from the double hung to the full height tilt and turn. That, although the glazing of the upper and lower portions of the sash will be in different planes, the stiles and meeting rail will be in the same plane, and therefore will not successfully recall the appearance of 2 separate sashes, and that the proposed work will diminish the special architectural and historic character of the building and of the Greenwich Village Historic District.
Commissioner Devonshire, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
Okay, Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin, Commissioner Chapin,
think she's not available.
Yeah, okay. Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafsson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 10 in favor and 1 not present, the motion carries.
That's denied. Please continue to work with the staff, and I'm sure we can find a window that meets your client's needs. Okay, we'll move to the next item.
The next item, Commissioners, is number 3, docket number 21-02311, 130 Prince Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, Borough of Manhattan, Block 501, Lot 15. Application is for a certificate of appropriateness. A garage building built in 1925. The application is to construct rooftop additions, install mechanical equipment, and modify ground floor infill.
Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good morning, Commissioners. Cass Stackelberg, Higgins, Quays, Barth and Partners. Just advance slide a moment. There we go. Very good. Sorry about that. I'm joined by my colleague Lakin Cole of Higgins, Quays, Barth, and the project architect Ryan Harvey of BIG. I'm Ryan. I'll be running through the presentation, and Ryan will be available for any questions that you may have when I'm through with the presentation. Sorry, some trouble advancing. So the project site is on the southwest corner of Prince and Worcester Street, located in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. And there are 2 components to the property. There's a building, a 5-story building on the corner on Worcester and Prince that was constructed in 1988 under a commission approval. And then a 1925 garage building here mid-block on the south side of the street. These 2 buildings are combined internally. And the 5-story building that was approved in the 1980s has a limestone cladding across the base, precast concrete panels on the upper 4 floors, and then a visible stucco-clad penthouse on the upper floor. The brick-clad garage building here, dating from the 1920s, also there was a 1-story addition added onto the garage building in the 1980s as part of the overall application for the new construction. Like so many Soho properties, this site has an interesting history of continued adaptive reuse. The garage building obviously began its use in the 1920s as a garage. At the time of designation, it was being used as a bakery. And then subsequent to the bakery's use and part of the 1980s redevelopment, the whole property was used for art galleries and offices. And more recently, the property has been used for offices on the upper floors and retail uses across the ground floor. The property is also subject to a special permit under 74-711, which was pursued by the then owner of the building in 2013 for retail use at the ground floor. And there were changes to the historic garage building as part of that 2013 application, which I'll describe in greater detail in a few moments. The scope of work, as Caroline mentioned, is rooftop construction, including removing this 1-story penthouse, reconstructing a new 1-story pavilion that is further set back and considerably less visible, and then ground floor modifications, which are limited to some of the openings along the ground floor of Prince Street in the new infill that was constructed in 2013 following the special permit. A site plan with the boundaries of the original Soho Historic District. The building is located here, as I said, on the southwest corner of Prince and Worcester. In detail, the garage is 100 feet of frontage, the new building 25 feet of frontage on Prince Street, and then 100 feet of frontage on Worcester Street. Some historic images. These are 1940s tax photos. The building on the corner was constructed in the 1850s originally as a police station and then later converted to a courthouse. And this building was demolished in the 1960s just prior to designation. And then you can see here the 1920s garage building mid-block, which, as I said, at the time of designation was being used as a bakery. In the New York Times in 1989, there was 1988, there was an article about the new development, blending new and old, highlighting the development of the gallery and commercial building on the corner with its, let's say, sort of postmodern detailing with a limestone across the base, which was then extended across the base of the garage, and then the precast panels above. The drawings that we were able to identify and locate from the 1980s for this development shows the existing building, the existing garage building, as a 4-story garage building. This is basically an existing or demo elevation that was included in the filing materials for the new construction. And you can see across the base of the garage, historically, there was a range of different sized openings and a sort of a regular asymmetrical configuration with pedestrian doors, vehicular doors, larger storefronts, smaller openings. These almost read as storefronts. So there was an irregular quality to the base of the building historically. And then with the development in the 1980s, the 5-story building on the corner, the 1-story penthouse, the 1-story extension on the roof of the garage, and then the recladding of the base of the building in limestone, the base of the historic building in limestone to tie it together with the new construction on the corner. As I mentioned, in 2013, the owners of the building at that time pursued a 74-711. This is a photograph from 2009 on the left, showing the historic 1980s condition with granite water table and limestone cladding, and multi-light fixed windows on the upper floors and storefronts as part of the requirements of the 74-711. The base of the building, the limestone was stripped off and the base was reclad in brick. And the storefronts were changed to sort of evoke the larger scale openings that were present when the building operated as a garage. The windows as well in the upper floors were replaced with more accurately detailed industrial sash windows that are operable. Again, a few additional existing condition photos of the corner at Worcester and Prince, and then a view looking east or southeast along Prince Street, just seeing the large scale storefront openings across the base with the brick cladding and the sash windows, the industrial sash windows on the floors above. Sorry. The existing axonometric, just to give you a sense of the volumes of the building. So again, the corner building, the penthouse that was constructed with it on the roof, the 1-story extension across the roof of the garage, also part of that development. Mechanicals have been housed along the south side of the roof, and a stair bulkhead on the west edge of the roof of the water tank remaining in the rear corner. The proposal is to remove the penthouse, construct a new 1-story pavilion that's set back further from the street facades, and to create sort of an enclosure for sitting area and a working space on the roof. Mechanicals enclosed within a screen wall here, and then an open pergola on the west edge of the roof. The only elements that are visible or partially visible is the northern portion of the pavilion, and then a portion of the railing. There's a railing around the perimeter of the roof, and the idea of this roof space is to be occupied by the office tenants of the upper floors of the building, and there are walking paths around the pavilion, and obviously clearance is required for FDNY and such. Again, an existing photo, the penthouse across the roof of the building and the other features, and some diagrams. This is an existing axon of the roof on the left and a proposed on the right. Again, you can see the outline in gray of the existing penthouse. The idea is to keep the existing egress stairs on the roof shown in pink here and here, rationalize the mechanical equipment so they're all tucked in along the south wall within a screen wall, and then to install or construct a pergola over the existing stair bulkhead on the west wall, along the west parapet wall, to allow for some open seating area and workspace at the center of the roof. Looking at this sort of circulation diagram, the idea is to integrate circular elements, particularly circulation elements, through the entire workspace from the second floor through the roof. And the idea is to use these circular forms to promote movement and sort of allow for percolation up through the building. And then the forms on the roof, both ovals and circles, on the roof include an enclosed pavilion for meeting space, and then the other elements that I mentioned, the pergola, open pergola, and the screen wall for the mechanicals. Looking at those sort of curvilinear forms, I think initially one might think that they're sort of foreign to the landscape in Soho, but as one looks across the ground plane, the building facades, and even the roofs, these are forms that one sees in the district. So across the bottom, images of the prevalent vault lights. Obviously metal and glass architecture is a key component of the district. Vault light platforms, both over on the east side of Lafayette, and this photo actually directly across the street on the north side of Prince Street. These are elements that one sees throughout the district and sort of refer back to the forms that are proposed for the roof. Arcuated architecture, of course, is prevalent throughout the district. This is a detail of the facade of the Howat building on Broadway with its arched windows. And then, of course, across the roofscape of Soho in particular, wooden water tanks are a feature that one sees from the street looking up. And this photo here on the top row in the middle, a view looking south across the roofscapes of Soho, seeing the prevalence of water tanks. And this photo is from 1973. This is a photo of Trisha Brown's roof piece. This was a dance performance that was performed actually the same year the district was designated. And what we find fascinating is the connections between some of the ideas behind this piece and really what the goals are of the roof. So I don't know if you can make out in the photos that you can see, but the dancers of the company were positioned, individual dancers positioned north to south all the way across the roofs of Soho, all the way down to Walker Street. So you can see one of the performers here, one of the dancers here, and there's another here. And the idea was this sort of idea of movement and communication and creativity sort of linking all the rooftops of Soho from north to south. And we see sort of drawing inspiration both from the creativity that's inherent in the streetscape and the roofscapes of Soho into the proposed uses up on the roof of the building. Looking at the materiality of the proposal, the pavilion is proposed to have a copper nickel standing seam roof with just very simply detailed glass wrapper, a Core-10 steel enclosure around the mechanical equipment, and then a simple open pergola over a stair bulkhead. Again, the only portions of this that are visible are sort of this edge of the pavilion and then portions of the railing. The railing is proposed just to be a very simple stainless steel handrails and posts with a cable mesh that will really disappear from below. Comparative roof plans, the existing roof plan on the left and the proposed roof plan on the right. You can see the position of the existing penthouse here, set back about 4.5 feet off of the Worcester Street parapet. The new pavilion will be set back 9, almost 10 feet off of the Worcester Street side. Off of the Prince Street side, currently the penthouse is about 5.5 feet off of the parapet, and the proposal is to push this back at 13.5 feet. You can see the pathways that are outlined, and the idea is to have this space be available to the tenants below for walking, for creative uses, with a railing around the perimeter of the roof. A section, again, just showing the connectivity of the stairs up through the building and the relatively low height of this pavilion at 10'7", considerably lower than the existing penthouse, and then the pavilion, the pergola to the west. Comparative elevations existing here on the right. You can see the penthouse shown here and the proposed on the left. The current penthouse up to the roof level is 12 feet, a bit taller if you include the skylights. and the proposed pavilion is 10'6". So we're about 1.5 feet shorter and also set back. The elevations along Worcester Street, existing here on the right, proposed on the left, just showing the relative heights and setbacks of the addition. Some details, this is an elevation of the pavilion, again, a standing seam roof with this sort of taut glass wrapper, really to bring daylighting into this meeting space. And then the corten steel screen wall around the mechanicals, which are shown dashed beyond the pergola here on the lower right. Some additional elevations of these rooftop features, and then a detail section cut through the edge of the pavilion, the glass panels here, the standing seam copper nickel, which will go be installed via natural copper and will patinate to a sort of a warm copper reddish gray fairly quickly. Some visibility studies from around the roof, an existing photo on the left with the mock-up, a rendered view, and then a zoomed view, zoomed rendered view on the right. So the only visibility in this view is just across the top edge of the parapet. You can just see the top handrail. If you look very closely, you can see the top handrail of the railing, but really sort of imperceptible from the view on the street. Continuing a bit to the west, again, you can see the existing penthouse through a break in the 1980s parapet. There's a railing. Currently, that railing will be retained, and that's really all you see. So from this view, there is actually less visibility of the rooftop construction than currently. Continuing further west, now we're on the west side of West Broadway. Property is down here. You can just make out the existing penthouse here, and that element will be removed. And then in this zoom view, you can just make out very faintly the frame of the railing, pointing out that there are other rooftop features. Railings are elements that one sees throughout the streetscapes of Soho, just given the nature of the buildings. This is a view now looking south down Worcester Street, an existing view with the orange netting for the railing. That penthouse will disappear, and you'll just see the railings in this view, in a zoom view. This is the existing railing at the cut parapet, and then the handrail, proposed handrail beyond. This view from the corner, similar to the view that you saw at the beginning of the presentation, really the only change in this view is the removal of this stucco-clad penthouse from the 1980s and the reading of that building a bit more clearly. Continuing on Worcester Street, similarly, the only change on this view is the removal of that penthouse, sort of a cleaner reading of the underlying building. And then some long views looking looking west along Prince Street. So this is the building down here in the distance. You can see the penthouse, the existing penthouse here, and then a bit of orange netting. This would be the railing, and then the rendered view. The penthouse that we're proposing obviously is lower. It's got a sloping roof, and then in the zoomed view, you can see just those elements. And obviously, this is a refined metal and glass architecture. Obviously, Soho is filled with metal and glass architecture, largely about increased daylighting, and that really are some of the same goals that we're after in this penthouse. And then a very long view. This is now looking from the east side of Mercer, hundreds of feet away. The building is all the way down here, here in the rendered view, and then a zoomed view. You're just seeing the sort of front edge of the penthouse and a portion of the railing from this perspective. There are changes to some existing doors and windows on the setback of the penthouse. We're actually going to be working with the staff on this, so I'm going to just go through this quickly. Our understanding is that this is not under commission review, existing, proposed, and some details. And then finally, there are a handful of ground floor modifications. This is an existing elevation on Prince Street above, and a proposed elevation on the bottom. Two primary changes to point out. There's an existing storefront entry door, a pair of doors here on near the western end of the facade. The proposal is to replace those doors with a fixed storefront window matching the window directly adjacent. And then on the east side of the elevation, and this is again at the base of the garage, there's an existing egress door, and for reasons that I'll explain in just a moment, the proposal is to create a pair of egress doors to separate cellar egress from the upper floor egress. And so we're proposing a pair of egress doors. Of course, this is impacting infill from 2013. And then what's called out a detail 3, that's just the installation of intercom and a card reader, which also we're working with the staff on. An existing plan above and proposed plan, again, showing the single door here, proposed to go to a double pair of egress doors, and then the change here from storefront entry to storefront window. Looking at the storefront changes, again, the doors here to the window, the idea is to replicate the detailing of this window, the bay directly adjacent, a fixed metal window, a stone sill with a brick bulkhead matching the depth and the detailing of the existing infill. Some details of that new infill, again, the sill with a stone and brick base. And then just turning to the egress, this is an existing park plan and a proposed park plan. The area in key is here, fronting onto Prince Street. Currently, the egress for the entire building dumps into this stairwell and then out the door. And there is a need for, really related to building security, to separate the commercial uses that will be in the cellar from the office uses on the floors above. And so there's no way to create a separation in this small landing between this stair and this stair. So the proposal is to create a demising wall between the two stairs and introduce a separate door. So this stair will egress up out of the cellar. This stair will egress down from the office floors above, and it requires widening this opening so that there are a pair of doors. And again, all the infill across the base of the building dates to that 2013 modification. In elevation, existing and proposed and part plan, there will be security devices recessed into that opening, but a very simple modification to unarticulated contemporary brick. An existing photo above and then a rendered view below. You can see the changes to the storefront door, converting it to a window here, and then the widening of the egress bay here. And I'll just remind you of that historic elevation that I showed earlier. The base of the building historically had a series of asymmetries for the different uses for the vehicular entries, the pedestrian entries, the storefronts, the office that were associated with the garage. So while this is changing the organization of the base of the building, we feel like it's not creating a condition that didn't even exist historically in terms of the slight imbalance from one end to the other. And then finally, an overall rendering of the building with the changes at the ground floor. As you've seen in the visibility studies, the changes at the roof level really are modestly visible. And we think that the changes and the architecture of the roof, both in terms of the volumetrics of those rooftop features and their architecture sort of about bringing daylight and use to this roof, are really sort of tied to the history of the buildings throughout the district, and tied to the creativity that's such a part of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. And we look forward to hearing your thoughts and taking any questions you may have.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we'll move to public testimony, and we may have questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And we will start with anyone who signed up in advance. And I'll now turn it over to Lisa Kersavage. Lisa.
Okay, great. We had one person signed up, Andrew Genzel, and I'm going to bring you in as a panelist. And you just need to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you choose. And if you could state your name for the record, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. Andrew Genzel here. I'm a resident of 138 Prince Street. an adjacent building. And I'm speaking specifically in relationship to the rooftop expansion proposed. Besides our building's concerns about sound, noise, and security, which I understand is not the province of Landmarks Commission, I just wanted to express my building's concerns about the overall aesthetics of the proposal and the precedent it's making for expansions on rooftops in Soho and in any landmarks district whatsoever. To me, it seems like the very form of these things are antithetical to the landscape of the rooftops that are seen out of, I mean, I understand about sight lines from the streetscape, but remember we have people looking onto this building from the surrounding neighborhood. And in particular, in regards to just the forces at hand in Soho in general, and with future development, I just feel like it's a precedent that should be scrutinized with all due concern by the commissioners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next, I see a hand raised, Sarah Walker.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, terrific. Thank you for taking my comments and questions. Echoing a few of Andrew Ginzel's words, and as somebody else who is a resident of the next door building, one could see this plan as fundamentally a rooftop commons for the building's office workers and their guests. Would then the sightlines from neighbors' apartments be a consideration? Especially considering even though it was argued otherwise, the rather non-historical nature of the design. Thank you for considering my question. Thank you, commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Next, Rosalie Ronsky. Rosalie, you just need to unmute yourself. There you go. And turn on your camera if you choose.
I am trying also to get a picture. Okay, can you see me? And am I unmuted? Yeah. Okay. I'm also a resident of the adjacent co-op, and I object to the use of the roof in this manner and think that Trisha Brown would be rolling over in her grave to be used as an instrument for developing the current proposal. That our rooftop views are very important to people in Soho, and we are concerned, that the vision that between our building and their building, which has had trespassers in the past, is insufficient, and that they should be putting a higher wall up. And if they put a higher wall up, you would see it from the street. And also that we have no guarantee that this isn't going to be a party venue. It's being designed as a very, as a space that's conducive to a party venue, which would cause noise in the neighborhood. And additionally, we have no guarantee that this is not going to be another Cipriani with a rooftop. There are other precedents in Lower Manhattan of rooftop uses, and we have no guarantee that the top floor isn't going to be a restaurant in this part of their entertainment venue. So between the design being inappropriate for a rooftop in Soho and the possible uses of the space, if they can't rent to a tech firm, which they represent, is what they want.
Okay, thank you. Could you please state your name for the record before? Oh. Okay. Well, that was Rosalie Ronsky. And I think that is everybody that signed up.
Okay, thank you. Rich, do we have any written testimony that was submitted to the
Yes, we do.
agency?
We do have a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 2 recommending approval of the project, but 5 other letters from nearby neighbors in opposition to the project.
Okay, thank you. All right. We do have some further questions, but Cass, why don't I ask first if you'd like to respond to the comments, and then we'll get to our questions.
Sure, sure. So a few things. One, obviously the commission has a long history of approving visible and non-visible rooftop construction in Soho, as well as other districts. I think the basic concept of reconstructing a penthouse and other associated rooftop elements is consistent with the way the commission has regulated this district and many districts for decades. You know, regarding the formal qualities of the proposal, these volumes are meant to really sort of enclose this interior seating area and are intended really for sort of passive use by an office tenant. The volumes themselves are different than what is there currently on the roof, but I think as we've talked about, as I've talked about in the presentation, they are tied into sort of curvilinear forms that one sees throughout the district. But those forms are barely visible from the public way, which is how these projects are regulated. The reference to Trisha Brown, I do want to just obviously make the point that we are not drawing a direct link to Trisha Brown's roof piece, but the idea inherent in Soho and written into, particularly into the Soho Extension Historic District, is about this neighborhood in particular and the sort of history of creativity. And that is something that the architects are drawing inspiration from. And in particular, this use of the roofscape as sort of a whole sort of other plane for creativity is something that actually is relevant and important in our considerations as this proposal has come together. Finally, I do want the commissioners just to understand that there was an extensive conversation during our community board meeting with the Landmarks Committee of Community Board 2 about these concerns about the roof being a party space. That is not how the roof is going to be used. We made sure that there was open dialogue between ownership and the neighbors. It is something that the owners of the building take seriously. We want the commissioners to understand that that's something that we are considering and trying to sort of foster dialogue between the neighbors and the owners. But the uses here are not, Cipriani will not be buying this roof, I can guarantee that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
A question about the railings. I'm looking at the rendering on, let's see, which page is it? Page 18 of 75. And it looks to me like the proposed railing, which is the most visible of your additions, is considerably higher than the current parapet, obviously. And is that because you're raising the ground plane with your plantings?
I think, Ryan, can you answer that? The railing is detailed at 3.6, but I'll have Ryan talk about the roof section.
You guys can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Terrific.
And just state your full name for the record.
Yeah, it's Ryan Harvey from Big Architects. Thank you. Yes, that's correct. We're raising the ground plane or the finish plane of the roof in order to allow for the vegetation and the depth necessary for that vegetation. So our railing has to be by code from that level.
Right. So is it intended that the planted areas be accessible to people walking around, or are they for visual appreciation only?
It's for visual appreciation, but it will need to be accessed for maintenance, of course.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And, yep. Thank you.
I'll also just to add, you can see in the plan here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, sorry, but there's a pathway around the pavilion and then a seating area here. So it's sort of a combination. I mean, it's meant to be sort of inhabited and the railing is around the perimeter. There's also the required clearances for the fire department, so all of those are sort of taken into account in terms of the position of the railing.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, not seeing any questions. I'm going to suggest we move to our discussion. So I am currently asking to unmute you. So be sure to look at your computer and accept that. And thank you. Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And of course, much of it will be about the rooftop, but we also are looking at the openings at the ground floor. So let's be sure to comment on both. Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you like to start on this one?
Sure. I'm going to start with the ground floor, which changes there I think are appropriate, simple and necessary for egress. I think they're fine. The rooftop addition, I find to be mostly acceptable. My biggest concern is if you go to page 33, which is the view, expanded view from the east, I believe. You can see the corner of, or not corner, portion of the new addition. And I appreciate that it's going to be lower than the existing penthouses, which I think is an improvement. And I think the visibility of the railing is probably going to be fine. What's concerning to me is the shape of the pavilion, which I know is the entire concept of the project. But even though the argument was made that there are circular forms in the district and there are water towers, there really aren't rooftop pavilions like this in this shape. And I think that's the aspect of it that I find most inappropriate. So I'd be curious to hear what other people have to say about it. I think I would approve a visible addition here. I'm just not sure about the shape, that curved shape.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Chapin?
I like the design of the rooftop, so I'm a little struggling with the comment that Commissioner Holford-Smith just made about its visibility as a round element. I want to think a little bit about that because I just as a design, I think it's an attractive design, the way the rooftop is laid out, and I understand why they're doing that. And I also think that the street level changes are appropriate. I'm fine with those. Okay. So seems, it's at a considerable distance. Obviously, that's a zoom of the. Okay, thank you. I'd like to hear from some other people too, I guess.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay. Well, I think that the biggest deal for me is the consideration of the 74-711 on the garage building and how that affects my judgment of the various elements within it. So what that does is it just kind of cranks up one's sensitivity, especially related to the garage building. So I would say that I don't have any concerns about the ground floor expansion of the door for egress. But I would say I did look back at the existing building, and I would just ask the applicant to work with staff maybe to increase the solidity of the ground floor a little bit. If you're opening it a little bit, I think that the nature of that ground floor was a little bit more solid and a little bit less storefronty and open. So if there is a possibility to increase the density of the masonry there, I think it would probably be more consistent with the garage quality of the building. I think that the railings are the most visible element. The removal of the penthouse is, of course, a very good thing, I think. I would suggest, and I don't know if this is allowed or not, but I would suggest that the applicant look with staff and with the DOB at the possibility that if that railing is there really just to, if the railing placement is generated by the landscaping, to either try to pull it in so it's further away from the parapet, so it reduces the visibility. so that some of that so it's, instead of being at the very edge of the landscaping, it's maybe in the middle of the landscaping. Maybe you vary the height so that you can reduce it. I think that if it's adjusted a little bit, that the visibility of the railing can be reduced. This particular view is, for me, it would have been troubling had it been closer, but I think the fact that it's so far away is less of a concern for me. My only concern with the design, and it's not really a poison pill, but it's something of a concern, is that the volume of the new glazed element that we see in the rendering here bridges over between the two buildings, and I think that, you know, when we do approve rooftop additions, we want to try to emphasize that even when buildings are joined, that the distinction between the buildings is maintained. But because of the very, very limited visibility of it, and because you can't really see the bridging of the rooftop element from the street, I think I could accept it as it is.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
Okay with the ground floor changes. I do agree with Commissioner Goldblum about the railing. And I agree. I feel that the addition, although visible, is minimal enough and frankly preferable, as far as I'm concerned, to the whiskery trees that are there now. So I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen? Commissioner Chen, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I didn't hear.
Okay.
My internet is unstable. That's why I didn't hear yeah, I do agree with most of the comments. I think the base, especially Commissioner Goldblum, about if there's, you know, I think the ground floor is appropriate, but if some enhancement can be made with the prior condition of the garage, that should be done. I'm sort of torn between the rooftop. I sort of listening to Ann Hofer-Smith's comment. It reminds me of Le Corbusier's rooftop, you know, this curvilinear form, and whether, you know, but being so far away, and in this particular view, I do understand her concerns about the curvilinear form, whether it is something that the commission has you know, find it acceptable. So I defer to listen to the other committee.
Commissioner Bland?
Ground level is fine. Rooftop, maybe even finer. I think it's a great solution. It eliminates approved by this commission, I guess, but not very nice penthouse in places, and places on it are much less visible, but to me, excitingly visible, partly visible from only a few places, rooftop addition. I have no problem with the railing or anything else. I think it's a great solution, and I'm sensitive to the neighbors' concerns, but you know, this happens all over the city, and it's outside of our purview, as I think they pretty much understood, and in the purview of police and others to be sure that proper activity is occurring on that really now wonderful new ability to use our roof here in New York City. More than ever, we might need to be using our outdoor spaces effectively. So I think this is a really nice solution.
Commissioner Lutfi?
I happen to agree. I think this is a very nice project. I'm delighted to see the addition that's there, which to me is sort of like an appendage that kind of confuses the architecture, the original architecture of the building. So I'm happy to see it come off. And this is so much more understated. I think the design is quite nice, and the visibility is minimal. I don't have a problem with the shape at all. I'm completely, I agree. We do have circular shapes on, or rounded shapes on the roofs of buildings. And this one certainly in no way is obtrusive. If the railing can be set back a bit, I'm in favor of that. And I am fine with the way, with the modifications at street level.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
I'm in favor. The lower level is fine. It's appropriate. I think in this particular case, the language of the plan is really great. It works very well. In this particular case, I wish we would be able to see more of the building itself, because all I see now is just a corner, and I'm walking down the street and I'm looking and thinking, what is that? And I just see a piece. And I'm wondering if I saw the whole curve, if I saw the whole continuity of it, would be much more appealing as a pedestrian, as opposed to seeing just a corner. But I think it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson?
I'm okay with the openings on the ground floor there. I find them to be appropriate. I thank Commissioner Bland for answering the question to the person who testified. You know, viewing views from private residences, generally speaking, are outside of our authority. And just because it's a garage building doesn't mean you can park just anything on top of it. That said, these series of rooftop additions are modestly visible. And I think that we're not going to be able to really distinguish very much of the shape from ground level. I do agree with Commissioner Goldblum that they should consider making the railing somewhat less visible.
Okay, and Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Bland and others. I can support every aspect of the project and think it's all appropriate.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have one. All right, so I think what we have is we have largely support here. We have almost 100% support for the rooftop addition as is, but with a couple of people, I think, to just sort of round that out, who have asked that they explore setting the railing back to make it less visible. And while we have enough votes to approve the ground floor as well, I think it would be good to ask them to explore the idea of looking at some more solidity. So we can add that into it. And I'll go ahead and make this motion. Okay, so in the matter of docket number 21-02311, 130 Prince Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, a garage building built in 1925. This is an application to construct rooftop additions, install mechanical equipment, and modify ground floor infill. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that none of the proposed work will damage or destroy any significant architectural features, that the reduction to the overall amount of modern rooftop accretions which will be visible from a public thoroughfare, will help support the primacy of the historic architectural features in the streetscape views, that except for limited views of the proposed eastern rooftop addition and roof railing, none of the proposed rooftop additions or structures will be visible from a public thoroughfare, that the eastern rooftop addition will be set back from the street facades and only will be seen from public thoroughfares over the existing modern 5-story building extension, and that the contemporary design and predominance of glazing at the rooftop addition will be compatible with the extension, which features modern detailing and wide bands of windows. That the copper cladding for the roof will be in keeping with the variety of materials historically used at utilitarian rooftop accretions of industrial buildings throughout the historic district. that within this context, which features surrounding buildings of varied height and roof lines and robustly articulated cast iron facades, a distinctively designed rooftop addition reflecting its modernity and seen over the facades of the modern building extension will not detract from the historic building or streetscape views. That when combined with its simple design, typical size and placement and limited visibility from public thoroughfares, the material and finish of the unpainted aluminum railing will be a discrete presence, and that the proposed ground floor alterations will modify openings which were previously altered in size and will be compatible with the proportions and pattern of the existing redesigned ground floor, and that the lack of uniformity of the masonry openings at the base will be in keeping with the character of the building, which historically featured openings of various sizes at its base, and that the proposed simply designed ground floor will be in keeping with infill throughout the base in terms of its materials, simple detailing, and finishing. However, I do recommend that the fence be studied in consultation with the staff to reduce its visibility, and also encourage the applicant to continue to explore the openings at the base to maintain some of the historic solidity. All right, Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
And Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 11 in favor and none opposed, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Approved. Thank you. We'll move to the next item.
The next item is number 4, docket number 21-01411, 109 Bank Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, Borough of Manhattan, Block 635, Lot 35, an application for a certificate of appropriateness, a Greek Revival style row house built in 1846, and the application is to construct rooftop and rear yard additions.
And Commissioners, the applicant has joined the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Just click to activate the screen. Please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, is Margaret on controlling the
I
screen?
am,
Okay.
although I'm not able to share my screen, it's saying that there's another participant sharing their screen.
I think you just need to click on
Okay.
it and then then you can advance the slides.
Okay, I'm going to switch the remote control to Margaret so that
Thank
you
you.
can control the screen. And then all you need to do is just click on the screen.
Okay, and okay, so I'm presenting. It's not. I should start. Yes.
Yes, please start and state your name for the record.
Okay, I am Brendan Coburn. I'm the architect of record for the project, and helping me is Margaret, who is also an architect for the project. So this is a Greek Revival row house on Bank Street in Greenwich Village, and our proposal contains two primary elements, or three primary elements. A rear yard, two-story rear yard extension, a small bump out on the second floor of the rear elevation, and a rooftop penthouse. So Margaret, if we could click over to the first. So this is just the block plan. This is a row of 4 row houses. You're seeing them 105 through 111. Ours is 109. This diagram is showing that this little group of row houses was all built together. You can see that the 111 and 105 extend approximately 4 feet past the intermediate buildings, which will become more apparent as the presentation goes along. The block has a large apartment building here on Greenwich Street, and then it has some other apartment buildings further down the block towards Washington. The donut is rather fragmented and is a real hodgepodge. Within our little 4-unit lot, you can see that the neighbors to the east, 105 and 107, have full yard 1-story extensions. So those 1-story extensions are at the level of the garden floor of those 2 row houses. Next slide, please. This is just the history of the lot. You can see that it is largely, they've all, the shapes of the rears of the buildings were largely unchanged for quite some time. And then the 2 adjacent buildings got extensions. I don't know when, I guess closer to sometime after the Second World War. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview. We're doing some work on the front facade. We're changing the front door itself. We are simplifying the ironwork. There's some funny little brass details on it. This is all staff level work. We are changing the color. We are replacing the windows with new Marvin double hung windows, and we are changing the color of the paint to a very dark green, and same with the cornice. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is, I'm gonna start with the penthouse work. So we may have to jump around on the slides a little bit, but this is the existing building section through the structure. And I will point out 2 aspects of the project with this section. You can see that this building pitches from back to front, which is unusual for a Greek Revival house. And I've been trying to figure out if it's a long-standing thing or it's been altered at some point, and I don't have a sort of conclusive point of view on this. But this is the current roof line, as you can see. And then in the back, there's an existing non-original rear extension, but it is built between the walls of what is presumably an original T-porch. So next slide, please. So this is our proposed building section with our alterations. And so what you can see we've done for the penthouse is there's 2 little things. The bulk of the penthouse is set back 15 feet per the required zoning. We have dropped the roof level to reduce its visibility. There is a small piece of the penthouse which is the stair tower itself, a sort of bulkhead that extends into that 15-foot setback, but is allowable. And then in front of that, there is a air conditioning equipment enclosure. The other thing that you can see in this section is that we are raising the chimneys on the adjacent property and on our own property. We're eliminating 1 chimney on our property, raising the neighbor's chimneys and raising one of our chimneys so that we have the required clearance for flue gases. But we're also raising those chimneys in brick as part of our strategy of reducing visibility of the penthouse specifically from Greenwich Street. So just to be clear, there is no visibility of the penthouse or the bulkhead from Bank Street, but there is from over on Greenwich Street, which you'll see when we show our mock-ups. And then the other thing I would just draw your attention to while we're looking at this section is the new 2-story extension, which will be a masonry extension, will be intended to look more in keeping with the style of the rear of the building than the current. It also extends 3 feet 9 inches past its current position. And so that's that. In addition to that, we have this small bump out, which you'll see when we look at the rear of the building at the 2nd floor for what is equivalent to 2/3 of the width of the rear of the building. Finally, we are also excavating underneath the new extension and a portion of the garden to create a gymnasium down there, which would also probably fit under this title of crazy COVID add-ons that have cropped up since we started this project. Anyway, next slide, please. This is some contextual shots. This is the existing pile of air conditioning equipment on the roof, which is sort of towards the front of the roof. You can also see in picture number 1, there's a tall apartment building across the street from us. Next slide, please. This is then our proposed roof plan. And so you are seeing the 15-foot setback to the face of the penthouse room itself, which is just a sitting room. And then you can see the stair bulkhead is just below it to the east. And it has a skylight on top of it. And it slides forward because it's over the original stair location within this house, which is why it's forward and in that position. Because we are restoring that staircase in that house. But we have also pushed it down to get it out of view from the street. Next slide, please. So actually, Margaret, could you just pop to the front, the one that has the axon from the front? Oh yeah, there it is. So if you could take a look at axon drawing number 3 on this sheet, you can see the configuration of the front of the penthouse from the street view. So you see the facades down below. The penthouse is again set back. The bulkhead is slightly depressed to drop it out of view, and you can see that piece of fenced-in air conditioning equipment on the front, which is the only thing that gets into view on the front of the house. And then you can also see the chimneys here, both front and back, that are brought up in brick so that they actually look like they're part of that sort of landscape or roofscape that is more typical. Okay, so I believe that is it for my presentation of the front of the penthouse. So now, Margaret, yes, perfect. So on this drawing, we are now giving a quick walkthrough of the existing and proposed rear elevation of this house. So photograph number 1 is showing the existing non-original glazed room here, but you can see on either side what we believe are the original wing walls for the T-porch. And then we have the axon is showing the existing condition. And in the axon, you can see that that the neighbors to the east have these 2 full lot extensions. And then the neighbor to the west sort of has the typical enclosed 2-story extension. And then the drawing below shows our proposed changes. And so you're seeing the 2-story extension at the garden and parlor level, which is brick, and then it goes up and there's a green roof on the north side facing back, and then our small sort of 2-story bump out, not 2-story, 2-bay bump out at the 2nd floor. And then one of the things that's interesting about this row of houses is that the 105 and 111 both extend about 4 feet past the back, the rear elevation of 107 and 109. So our little bump out at the 2nd floor is only about 2 feet. So it's sort of holding back from getting out to the same line as 107. So it's a really rather modest little bump out facing this green roof or garden roof. Next slide, please. So just some photographs of what we're planning to do, and then Next slide, please. So just some contextual photographs of the donut. I don't think I have anything to, oh, well, if you look at photograph number 6, you can see how that building 105 is sticking out that 4 feet past us. And then if you look at photograph number 4, you can also see that 111 is sticking out past us. So next slide. I'm gonna come back to this, but this is related to the rear facade itself. So Margaret, could you just pop to the rear facade study? So this is our rear elevation, existing and proposed. And one of the things we are also doing, in addition to this extension, is we're proposing to drop the parapet of the rear of the wall at the top of the wall. And we're doing this largely to create a sort of nicer spatial feeling for that penthouse add-on. But we also have been sort of struck by the oddness of the size of the forehead on these 4 buildings, and to be honest, can't quite figure out how they got to be so tall. But Margaret, if you could just pop back to the previous photograph. So we don't think that well, we think this has all been altered or repaired or whatever, because we see evidence in the top. The photograph number 3 is showing 107 and 109, the seam of those buildings, which is irregular for a brownstone, and one can see evidence of some sort of corbelling, and then things have gone away. Things were there, things have disappeared, and then the brickwork itself on both 107 and 109 is rather messy. And if you compare, it's also, you're seeing a header course is visible throughout the rear facade, whereas 111 has a straight running bond with no header course. All of which is to say that we're sort of a little bit flummoxed by what the history is of the upper part of the rear of this building. We also have included this photograph from inside of number 2, which is showing some sort of line in the brick in the rear room of the top of the building, which we think shows evidence of possible reconstruction of portions of the parapet, but I can't say for sure. So next slide, please. Maybe the one after that. Okay, so quickly, again, this is the existing condition. And then the next slide, please. And this is the proposed set of alterations. There is the cellar is included, so there's a subterranean portion of this as well, but it's none of it which is visible. This section is, of course, interesting and useful because it is cutting through and showing how the buildings to the east are full lot extensions and sort of create a sort of further hemming in of things here. Next. Okay, these are going back to the penthouse presentation. So I think, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's the extent of what you want me to present. Is that correct?
Okay, so it seems that there's the rooftop addition.
Yep.
And the rear yard, reconstructing a rear yard addition. And that includes the sort of projecting bay on top, and then altering the roof line, the line of the top of the rear facade.
Yes.
Okay. And just, can you confirm whether or not the rooftop addition is at all visible from a public thoroughfare?
Oh yeah, it is. And so that we have photos of that from, here we go. So this is the mock-up. And so where it's visible from is Greenwich Street. So I think photo 6 shows you the most visibility, 5 is showing the reduced visibility. It is not visible from across the street or Washington Street. And then we have a photo montage with the rendering stuck in. So here, photo 1 is showing the montage of the 2 brick chimneys that are brought up, and then you can see a little piece of the penthouse there, and then that white, the little white bit is the fence around the mechanical equipment popping forward.
Okay. All right, commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, not seeing any questions now. I think we'll see if we have any public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to testify on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And we will start with anyone who signed up in advance. And I'll turn it over to Lisa Kersavage to walk us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. We had one person sign up, Kelly Carroll. You should be good to go, Kelly.
Thank you, Lisa. Kelly Carroll for Historic Districts Council. HDC discloses that the architect of this proposal, Brendan Coburn, is a member of our board of directors. Mr. Coburn did not participate, nor was he present during our Public Review Committee's discussion of 109 Bank Street. The committee found the application to be appropriate, except for the second-story fenestration pattern. HDC asks that the punched openings be retained, as this is a unifying element in the rear of these Greek Revival row houses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised.
Okay. All right. And Rich, do we have any written testimony?
We do have a resolution from the community board recommending approval.
Brendan, I think we have some questions, but do you want to respond to the testimony about the comment about the second floor windows?
I understand that. I get it. I understand it. I think in this case, it's because it's tucked back behind that projecting facade of the adjacent building at 111. It really has no significant impact on the sort of vibe and feel of the rear of that sort of composition of those four facades. So I'm comfortable with its appropriateness, and it does a lot to improve the interior quality of that particular floor of the house. So I would say it's a more important architectural feature to this renovation than, say, the whole parapet issue, although that also makes life better for that house.
Commissioner Jefferson, I think you have a question. Please go ahead.
Yes, if you go to your axonometric of the rear facade, I'm just curious about, there's a bump out on the second floor, and I wasn't sure if it was a bump that went across. So can you have that drawing?
I think Margaret, does control has to go back to Margaret to get to that drawing?
She currently has control. Thank you.
I actually am not able to.
Here we go.
Okay.
So that was, there we go. Oops.
Yeah. Well, so if you go to the previous one, the drawing itself, am I looking? Is that bump on the second floor?
Yeah.
All the way across, or is there a roof canopy that goes across, but the bump doesn't go across? So is that accurate? The bump goes all the way across, right, on the second floor?
No, it goes about 2/3 of the way. So
Okay.
you can
So,
see
so this, if you go to your elevation, so in fact, it only stops 2/3, and then you have a roof piece going across with a gutter coming down. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. And the extension of the roof across is because of the gutter? That's my question.
Oh, you mean why it's going fully to the west, to the right side of the drawing?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but it's the gutter. It's also the architecture of the space inside. And then we're trying to sort of maintain this masonry pier that you see that starts in the lower extension and then extends up to that floor. So we're also trying to make these steel windows that exist on the rear of the facade at the second floor are repeated the same pattern and set of proportions on the second floor, and then finally repeated on the penthouse itself.
And then if that's the case, then on the penthouse itself, the alignments with the second and third floor is slightly off again. The alignments don't seem to relate. Is there any reason architecturally for that?
Architecturally, just that the function changes a little bit there, and given that they're set back, I forget what it is, like 10 or 12 feet from the rear, there is no, experientially, you would never see that penthouse anyway, from this point of view. So architecturally, we're trying to keep it sort of like, as you're moving through the interior of the house, you understand that these things are happening repeatedly throughout the house.
Thank you. It's just thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Could you go to the page where I think it's 119, we have the views from the street. I'm sorry, 120, next one. There we go. So I'm noticing that the planters are quite visible from the street. They look rather, how tall are they above the cornice, and how far set back are they? And help me understand why that level of visibility over the front facade is.
Margaret, you might want to jump in here. I'd say 3 feet from the cornice. They are that high because the design intent from the landscape architect and from us as well is that when you're occupying that space or looking out, that apartment building across the street has a sort of looming presence, and one feels rather exposed when actually sitting on that roof. So this was just part of the design attempt to sort of make that rooftop garden feel more private.
Okay, you didn't really help me very much in explaining why it's appropriate from a historic preservation point of view to have a visible facade addition over the front facade, though.
Oh, well, I to be honest, I don't think I could provide you with one. You know, it's an impermanent thing. It's plants, it's a fence, it's, you know, protection. It's impermanent, but it is, you know, it is part of the design as we have it. I would say I can't tell you that it's appropriate, I guess, as
Well, Brendan, is this a limited view corridor? If you were to cross Greenwich Street and be on the same side of Greenwich Street as your block, would you not see it from there? Do you only see it from this point is my question. I'm just wondering if that's a way to think about it.
I think so. And then Margaret, can we just go back to, is that in our building section? No, it's not. It's not in the building section. It was really just in that study. Well, I would say that, yeah, it's this is the spot where it is visible. By the time you are on the same side of the street across Greenwich looking back, you don't see it. I think the parapet at 105 sort of pops up and, you know, absorbs a lot of things.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm answering that question.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, not seeing any other questions. I think we can move to close the hearing and begin our discussion. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Okay, hearing is closed. Okay, so we're going to begin our discussion. We have a rooftop addition that is obliquely visible with associated railings and plantings and mechanical equipment that you see obliquely. We are looking at reconstructing a 2-story rear yard addition, and this sort of projecting bay window at the 2nd floor. And I will just note on the commission's history with maintaining the top floor windows has been pretty consistent and is reflected in the rules that allow for staff level approvals, and the staff is not authorized to alter window openings on the top floor of row houses. However, at the 2nd floor, the staff could combine 2 openings to make a larger opening in this building. So it's really the slight projection that is actually before us. And then the 4th component of this application is changing the roof line at the top of the rear facade. So there are really these 4 aspects of the application for us to comment on. Commissioner Devonshire, would you like to start this one?
I'm okay with all of the aspects of this, Sarah.
Okay. And Commissioner Chen?
I'm share the same view as Commissioner Devonshire.
Commissioner Bland?
I agree. A fairly small house, lots going on here, but it's almost all invisible, and I think it's very well done as well.
Commissioner Lutfi?
I think overall the project is well done. I think on the rear, I would prefer to see the windows be more consistent with the neighbors and remove that, little rooftop above them. And I guess I don't understand why there needs to be any visibility on the front of the house. So I would, whether it's the plantings or actually the structure below it, I would say it either should be set back or, you shouldn't be able to go out on that side. You don't need to go out on that side of the roof.
Jefferson?
I agree on 3 issues. I disagree on the view. I think diagonal views are important, and if you see that much in a diagonal view, you're seeing a lot. So I think the diagonal view should be as important as looking straight on from the building. I would disapprove this because of the view.
Commissioner Gustafson?
The rear of the building, I think, is appropriate. It's a modest extension, especially in light of how unusual the donut conditions are. Cutting down the parapet. There's enough evidence there that there's a bizarre situation of some sort, whether from the interior or from the exterior. So I'm okay with that, reducing that. On the rooftop, I'm generally okay with it. However, the planters are obtrusive. I agree with the last 2 commissioners' comments. And I don't think that they are appropriate. And which is to say, it's not always easy being green.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I think that all of the aspects of the proposal are appropriate, and I do think that while visibility on the diagonal is important, in this case, the point that these planters are in a sense impermanent, if in fact they are, is convincing to me that if these were trees with a lower planter, I don't know that we would be able or have, in a sense, really the authority to say that they shouldn't be there. If we don't approve this and they come along and put planters up there, is that still our purview? In other words, if we don't approve the visibility of anything up there. So I'm a little confused about that, but I find that all of the project is appropriate.
Commissioner Holford-Smith?
I find the majority of this application to be appropriate. I do object to the high visibility of the planters at the front. So either if they could lower them, set them back, or preferably eliminate them. I find the other aspects of the application to be fine.
Okay. And Commissioner Chapin?
In general, I think the project is fine and very approvable. I also agree that the planters are more visible than necessary. I think that the planter could be lower, perhaps if it were like a wood planter color instead of the color that it is. And I don't have any problem with the vegetation being to the front. And I think that with some small changes that the staff could work on, they would still be visible, but the visibility would be much less intrusive. So otherwise, I'm fine with the project.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Goldblum?
Hey, it seems like we're coming to bank on John's comments, but we'll try to move beyond them. I think that the planters should be reduced in the front or eliminated. I have no problem with the visibility of the rooftop pavilion itself. The rear facade changes are acceptable.
Okay, great. So I think that we have enough votes to vote this out as an approval with modifications to work with the staff to reduce or eliminate the visibility of the planters at the front. So I know Commissioner Devonshire, you supported all of it. Would you mind making that motion?
I would be pleased.
Okay.
Matter of 109 Bank Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District, an application to construct rooftop and rear yard additions. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the rooftop addition will only be minimally visible from the public thoroughfares at a distance from oblique angles at the context of other rooftop accretions and secondary facades, that the simple massing and design of the proposed rooftop addition will be in keeping with typical rooftop additions and bulkheads throughout the district, that the rooftop addition will be set back from the front and rear facades, thereby maintaining a sense of the building's original massing, that the chimneys will be extended only to minimum height to meet safety regulations and feature materials and finishes that are typical of these utilitarian accretions found throughout the district, that the proposed rear yard addition will not be visible from the public thoroughfare, that the rear addition will not project further into the rear yard or exceed the height of the majority of existing rear additions at this portion of the block and will not diminish the central green space, that the upper portion of the rear facade has been altered and is in poor condition, which will be exacerbated by the construction of the addition below. Therefore, its reconstruction is warranted. That the excavation for an extended cellar floor will be designed and conducted in compliance with the DOB regulations under the supervision of a licensed engineer to protect the building and adjacent buildings. And that the applicant will work with staff to diminish the visibility of the planters at the rooftop, and thus the proposed work will not diminish the special architectural or historic character of the building or the Greenwich Village Historic District.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, 11 in favor and none opposed. The motion carries.
All right, thank you. Move to the next item now.
The next item is item number 5, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, docket number 21-02425, 5 to 7 East 62nd Street in the Upper East Side Historic District, Block 1377, Lot 7, a modern style synagogue building designed by Percival Goodman and built in 1956. The application is to alter the facade and replace infill and install a canopy.
Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the slides. You can just click on the screen to activate it, and please state your name for the record. You may begin the presentation. And remember to unmute yourself as well.
Okay, hi there. My name's Arthur Shaban. I'm the architect for the Fifth Avenue Synagogue. With me is Kristen Ziegler, also an architect in my office working on the project. And she'll be advancing the slides and I'll be doing the presentation. So as you said, the building was designed in 1958 by who we can describe as the premier and really incredibly prolific mid-century architect, Percival Goodman. The synagogue now is in the process of its first significant renovation in, boy, I would say in the last, well, in its 62-year history. We're approaching this project with an understanding of the architectural uniqueness, the cultural significance of what is really an important mid-century landmark, and its position also in really the finest, one of the finest historical districts of the city. So with this sentiment, the congregation and I are fully committed to retaining and enhancing its architectural, its cultural legacy through what will be a sensitive renovation that responds to the programmatic and what you're going to be looking at, the security needs of the congregation, while at the same time dealing with maintenance and making the building code compliant and accessible. And this we hope will allow this building to be viable for well beyond the next 62 years, preventing it from suffering the fate of other mid-century landmarks. Kristen, if you can point as I describe, as you see on the map, the building's located on the north side of 62nd Street. It's about 190 or so feet east of 5th. Just to the left at 1 East 62nd is the home designed by Horace Trumbauer in 1903. It had a rooftop addition that was built in 38. To the right, to the east, is a Beaux-Arts style kind of reserved townhouse. That's 11 East 62nd. It's an incredible block with this distinguished and very eclectic group of townhouses, all from 19th and 20th century. So we came to you in June for approval of the elevator extension, and now that's being implemented to make the rooftop area accessible and the play area for the kids. Now we're coming to you to show you a facade alteration that are generated really from security requirements for the building. We're sadly all too aware of how vulnerable our religious institutions are to security threats, and the changes we're proposing are key to making this building safe. In developing this design, areas where the egress was not code compliant were impacted. So we in turn were forced to modify those areas. And I'll show you the impact of these egress improvements. I'll show you what the impact of those are on the current facade. Finally, the changes we're proposing to the entrance rendered the current canvas awning obsolete, and that gave us the opportunity to change the entry awning, which we are very happy to be able to do, as it's completely out of character with the building, and we're going to replace it with a new marquee that relates far better to Percival Goodman's design. So let's look at the plans. Okay. On the left corner, for your reference, is a photo of the building. In the middle is the existing ground floor plan, and on the right is the proposed. The areas that are highlighted in red are the areas that are going to be impacted by our design changes. So let's quickly enter the building as it exists in the middle. So you enter now through a single set of double bronze doors into that small vestibule. To the left of the vestibule is a room that serves as an office, kind of package room. Further to the left is the secondary stair, which serves the mikveh, or the ritual bath that's in the cellar. And it also serves as the second means of egress for the entire building from the top down. Now let's look at what we're proposing. That's the one on the right. You can see that the single entry is being enlarged to provide separate, dedicated, and controlled access and egress vestibules. And that there's going to be a security station that's going to be positioned next to the entry vestibule on the east. This is part of the security protocol for the building. It's essential that the guard is positioned in a way that they can control and view people coming in and out of the building, while at the same time being in direct proximity to the people they're protecting. And of course, you see also that the current awning does not provide adequate coverage for the larger double vestibules. So we're going to look at this now at a larger scale. These plans are close-ups of the front of the lobby. The top is existing with the areas that are impacted dotted in, and the bottom is the proposed plan. So what you immediately see is that the enlargement of the vestibule toward the west, which is to the left, encroaches on the stair area. And because we are affecting that area, it's effectively an alteration. And as minor as it is, we're required now to correct non-compliant conditions. Our non-compliance is that the stair, this is actually similar to what a previous applicant showed you. The stair to the cellar is not properly separated by a fire-rated partition from the rest of the staircase, which it must be. So we're fixing that by adding that wall that, Kristen, if you can point to it, is marked in red. And we're providing two doors to the exterior, one that allows everyone from the roof to the lobby to egress, and then a separate one that allows people from the cellar to egress. You can also see, as I mentioned before, that the existing awning is not wide enough to provide coverage for the wider vestibule, and this gives us the opportunity that, as I said, we're happy to exploit, and that's to create a new covered entry that's much more in keeping with Goodman's architecture. So let's look at the exterior elevations. You can see the impact there. Top again is existing, bottom is proposed. The area that is sort of shadowed in is recessed into the facade. The area to the left, which has a slightly lighter shade, it projects from that recessed area, and the biggest protection from the facade is the curtain wall with the punctured olive-shaped windows. Delineated by a dotted line in both images is the menorah and the base designed by the sculptor Chaim Gross. And we dotted that in so that you could see the full elevation unobstructed. That feature, though, is integral to Goodman's design. The bottom image shows you our new marquee. It shows you the new double glass doors, and it shows you the new louvered panels and the new blind doors for egress from the cellar and upper floor. The higher canopy and the introduction of glass doors, which will be bullet-proof and blast resistant, gives a much more welcoming entry experience. You'll also be able to see in and out, which of course is part of the security protocol, and that also serves to make the building feel much more a part of the community. Also notice how the glass transom above the doors with the new canopy will now be exposed instead of being hidden by that canvas awning. So you won't feel so much when you're entering this building like you're entering through like a toe kick or a slot. Also, the continuity of the louvers that we're replacing and adding will help to improve the composition of the facade on an aesthetic level. I want to point out also that the current door to the mikveh behind the base of the sculpture, that was added about 10 or 15 years ago. This is not a historic portion of the facade. That door is recessed into the plane of the granite, and it is a faux painted metal door, faux painted to simulate the granite. So we're proposing doors instead that are going to finish flush with the facade, and they're going to be clad with a thin granite veneer, making them essentially blind doors. And that we feel does a lot to clean up the facade. So now we'll look at the whole facade in color, and then I'll show you the perspective renderings. So here on the left is the existing, the right again is the proposed, and you can see how our new design gives the entry a much more welcoming sensibility with the marquee being higher and being thinner. It's also less disruptive and it's less of an obstruction on the sidewalk as you look down the street. Let's go closer, you'll see the perspectives. So here you can see all the things we've been talking about. So you're looking northwest here. You have the lighter, higher marquee instead of that out of character, lower canvas awning. You have the increase of glass, allowing the building to feel less cloistered and more a part of the community. You have the new louvers, which give a more rigorous horizontal continuity to the composition, which is no longer interrupted by the canvas awning that was sort of stuffed under that facade curtain. And also notice how we subtly float the marquee off of Goodman's facade. So his curtain, that screen of punctured windows, is allowed to remain continuous. Also want to point out that we're presenting two options for the ceiling of the marquee. The one that you see here consists of backlit glass. The next option you're going to see is a bronze ceiling panel with a perimeter cove light. You'll see that shortly after we go through this first option. So here looking northeast, Kristen, if you can, I don't know if you changed the slide because I can't see. Yes, you did, thank you. So here looking northeast, notice also the blind doors. Actually, notice that you don't notice the doors that go to the cellar and the upper floor behind the Chaim Gross sculpture. Next slide. These are views now from northeast, from across the street, which I think show the same points that I've been making of the more inviting entrance. And then the next slide, which is looking northwest from across the street. As I said before, we have two options that we're presenting. So the one you saw had the marquee with the backlit glass, and this next one, if you could change. This one proposes the bronze ceiling panel with the perimeter band of light. This is again looking now northwest, and then the next one, please, looking northeast. And then going across the street, looking northeast again, and the next one, northwest, looking from across the street. I'll conclude the presentation with some technical drawings that are going to address aspects of the existing building and address in more detail our design intent. So the next image, please. This shows you the details of the marquee. I want to point out again how it sits slightly away from the existing facade. We did this to ensure that Goodman's design concept of this screen or this curtain of sorts with the olive-shaped perforations, that remains uninterrupted. You'll be able to see the continuity of the facade now from below the marquee and from the side as well. You see here that it's noted the marquee is 10 feet 7 above the sidewalk. It projects 15 feet away and it's 15 feet wide as well, so it's a square. And the marquee is quite thin. It's just about, I think, slightly more than a foot thick. The next image. Here you see the more developed details of the marquee. Again, this one is of the backlit glass option. You can see if you look closely at the end of the marquee, the small detail we did that has a little lip at the end. This next image is the marquee with the perimeter light and the bronze ceiling panel. So let's go to the next slide. We include these images to document what I would describe as a degree of ambiguity in Goodman's design intent. The top image shows you the facade as it's been executed in red granite. As far as we know, this is how the building was constructed originally. The bottom drawing is from the original construction documents, which we retrieved from the archives at Avery Hall. And this drawing indicates that the facade at the entry level was to be bronze. We also saw that he originally drew the facade, which I don't show in this image, but the punctured facade in brick, and it was ultimately built in a precast concrete that evokes limestone, and that was certainly a good choice of his. But this too indicates a kind of ambiguity in certain aspects of the design intent. We feel that the fact that the veneer was changed to granite from bronze could indicate a change of heart. And when we go back, we'll go to the next set of details and look at those with that notion in mind. So the next images show the existing and in cross-section, the proposed door details at the entry. So it's arguable that his decision to use a contrasting granite veneer instead of the bronze doors was to give more emphasis to the point of entry. The continuous wall of bronze, which was in modules that all were basically the same size as the door, diminished the hierarchy of the point of entry. So our change goes back to emphasizing the entrance to the building. Let's go to the next slide, please, and we'll look at the louvers. These images show you in our detail on the right side how we intend to replicate the details of the existing louvers. And this gives we feel a very appealing horizontal band, a horizontal continuity, which we are enhancing by continuing these louvers across the facade and replacing some of the glass transoms, which basically open to nothing anyway. Let's go to the next image, please. And this one shows the existing doors to the mikveh that are in the faux painted steel, which is obviously not original to the building. In fact, the location of the door is not original to the building. This was renovated, I believe, about 15 years ago to create access to the ritual bath, the mikveh that's in the cellar level. The drawing to the right illustrates our detail for making the new doors flush with the facade, so making them true blind doors. We're going to clad them in a thin granite veneer. Let's go to the next image, please. This one shows you the streetscape. You can see how the placement of the marquee, if you look at the plan now at the lower level, the second drawing on the bottom, that's the proposed, how the marquee projecting about 15 feet in plan ends at this sort of common denominator dimension, this common dimension average of the projection of all the facades along the street. And this, I think, as you walk down the street, helps again to weave this building, which is pushed back into kind of the rhythm of those facades. Let's go to the next slide. As we kind of draw to a close here, I'm showing you here 3 generations of the development of the exterior from 1958 approximately, when that photograph was taken, to the current proposal. And we feel very confident that our proposal, while it's initiated to provide for security needs and for programmatic needs of the congregation, it's also an improvement on the current facade, and arguably it provides the element that is really missing from the original one, and that's an articulated, proud point of entry. Let's go to the final slide. So here, I want to show you examples of Goodman's work that are characterized by similar sort of planar covered entries. The Fifth Avenue Synagogue is the only building that Goodman designed and built in a dense urban setting, which is sort of ironic as he was the author of Communitas, which is a book on urban planning, but he never had the opportunity except for this building. So in researching a precedent, we couldn't find anything that was literal, but I do feel that these images argue that given the current design requirements, he may very well have come up with a similar solution to what we're proposing. Keep in mind, Goodman considered himself a functionalist. So even though his work is when you look at it now, it can be seen as decorative and a little bit sculptural, but he fancied himself a pragmatist and often wrote that his designs were a direct response to how the building would be used. So in our case, you need protection from the rain when entering a building. You simply build a covered entry that solves the problem while expressing its purpose. So that is our presentation. Look forward to hearing what everybody has to say.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions at this time? Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. You'll just have to unmute yourself.
Just two questions. If you go back to page 5 of 23. This one, the new one, you don't show the grill, or you show it as subordinate or as glass. Is that a mistake, or is that?
No, I think that just may be the rendering. I zoomed in on that. I think it's just that it's so small. You don't read the bronze louvers, but they are there. But
yeah, because it's a T, right? Essentially, it's a horizontal band with a kind of a rectangle coming down and a plane on top, right? That's the reading.
Yes.
Right. Okay,
yes.
And then the size of the canopy, it doesn't fit within the plan framework of the building itself. So if you go to the plan of the building, the ground floor plan. So you see the edge of the building itself, and your canopy being a square sticks out past that. That's just a symbolic thing that it's that big and a square, or is it? It doesn't have to be that big. So the question is the proportion. Why that proportion? Why that sticking out of the volume of the building itself?
Am I supposed to respond, or do I wait till everybody?
You can go ahead and respond. He's asking why you chose this proportion for the canopy.
Yeah, I mean, we chose it. I would say the 15-foot width was largely chosen as a it had to effectively cover the entry area, which consists of the two doors that Kristen is pointing to, and we were working with the module to a certain degree of the olive cutouts, the olive-shaped cutouts in the facade. And we didn't want it to be too big. We didn't want it to be too small. So it's kind of a Goldilocks solution, trying to find the right proportion and functional solution.
Okay, thank you.
Sarah, it's Fred.
Yes.
I have forgotten how to raise my hand virtually, so I'm just shouting out.
Okay.
But I have a couple of questions. Originally, there was no canopy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I can anticipate your answer, but I'd like to hear it anyway. So why do you need a canopy?
Literally just to protect people I'll give you a more elaborate answer than just to protect people from the rain. I mean, typically the experience of going to a synagogue has like these sort of, you arrive at the synagogue, you'll see some people hovering in front of the building, they'll say hello to each other, then they go in, and then you go to the lobby, you say hello to other people. It's these sort of stages of greeting and meeting with your neighbors. And having a covered entry in front is kind of crucial to that whole to that whole experience.
Well, not to drill too much on that issue, but I think that's probably true on almost any house of worship.
Sure.
And it would be hard to imagine a canopy in front of a Gothic revival, standard sort of Gothic revival church in the city. Let's move to my second question, which is you showed in the section and you described with words the idea that you're setting this new canopy away from the screen wall, which sounds to me to be the right move. But I don't understand from a plan point of view, I don't think you showed us how those supports, where they are.
Yeah, the supports would be, Kristen, if you point to the image on the right side, because it's slightly larger, the line, the dotted line is the line of the canopy, and the solid line is the line of the facade. There would be a, imagine an extruded sort of slot tube that goes across, Kristen, if you can go from east to west pointing, from there to, keep going to there. And that is smaller than the dimension of the width of the thickness of the canopy. That's going to be about 10 inches. And there are going to be 4 cantilevered beams that will be within that area.
Okay, I got it now. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Chapin.
Yes, if we can look at the front view of the canopy, the proposed canopy. Yeah. Okay, so I had a couple of questions. One is similar to Commissioner Jefferson's, I think, which is not about the width of the canopy, which obviously is needs to be extended over the doors, and could be a little bit narrower to maybe line up with the no, I guess not. Anyway, so but really the depth of it's because it's extending, because it's square, it's extending out 15 feet and could be obviously potentially a rectangle. And the other issue is that you're floating it in effect above the where the grill is. So my question is, the decision to not have it come down a little bit so it actually seemed to sit on top of that grill instead of, if you're looking at it from across the street, to kind of float on the building. So that was my question about your, perception of the appropriate way to, the design of the canopy. Thank you.
Yeah, I can respond to that. The one of the things that we considered very early on is we were trying to assess what is the, for lack of a better word, what is the shtick? What's the concept that Goodman is using to evoke what this building means to him? And we felt, and this was also discussed with staff, we felt that the maintaining the integrity of that, what reads as sort of a curtain wall of that long facade of punctured windows was very, very important. We tried earlier designs where we put the canopy under the facade, and we felt that undermined that reading. So instead, we wanted to keep what was the strong design move that Percival was expressing, and try to intervene in a way that doesn't compromise that. So that was the decision to disengage it from the bottom of the curtain and not to bring it too low so it kind of looks fragile.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Devonshire.
Diana asked my question. To me, the canopy now sort of violates that screen that Goodman designed and clearly was very important to him. I was wondering why it wasn't lowered and below the screen at the level of the louvers.
Okay, Commissioner Halford-Smith.
My question is regarding the canopy supports, and so I think you mentioned that there are 4 beams that are projecting through the facade. So that means that you are basically cutting 4 holes into the concrete facade.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Other questions? All right, not seeing any other questions at this time. We may have more afterwards, but right now we'll turn to public testimony. And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. We will as well start with anyone who signed up in advance, and I'll turn it over to Lisa Krasavage to walk us through the testimony.
Okay, thank you. We had one person sign up. That's Friends of the Upper East Side. And that's Laura. I've brought you in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Laura Variale, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Chair Carroll and Honorable Commissioners. Friends is deeply concerned with the applicant's piecemeal approach towards this modern landmark. Architect Percival Goodman is considered a leading theorist of modern synagogue design, and we would have liked to see the proposed alterations to his Fifth Avenue Synagogue in its entirety in order to better understand the cumulative impact that the alterations will have on the building. We do not oppose the entry and infill replacement with the 2 new glass doors and acknowledge that they do create a more welcoming entrance for the synagogue. However, we believe that the proposal also weakens the simplicity and solidity of the base, which could be ameliorated if the entrance framework was slimmer and less brassy. While we agree that the proposed marquee is an improvement if compared to the existing canopy, Friends Preservation Commission strongly opposes this aspect of the application. The focal point of this building is an uninterrupted curtain wall with a regular rhythm of perforations for the stained glass windows. The proposed marquee visually and physically cuts into the curtain wall, disrupting the original harmony and rhythm of the synagogue. And the physical perforations will permanently damage the concrete, as well as create an opportunity for water infiltration, further harming the facade. The ornate stained glass windows, once lit at night, function almost like an art installation, one that will be completely disrupted by the illuminated marquee if approved. Friends urges the applicant to work with the commission to come back with a proposal that doesn't severely alter the modern design intent by Goodman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised.
Rich, do we have any written testimony?
We do have a resolution from Community Board 8 recommending approval.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'd like to turn back to the applicant and see if you'd like to respond to the comments that were made.
Sure. Are my slides still up or are they taken down?
They're still up. You, Margaret should have the control still of the screen.
If we can look at any one of the perspectives.
Kristen, you still have control and you can just click on the screen and move up.
So is that Kristen would have to advance on it?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, well, while she's doing that, I would argue that the marquee, in fact, does not really block the views of the windows. I think that the views of the window remain intact, and disengaging it from the facade, I think, ameliorates the issue of disrupting the continuity of that curtain wall, which we also agree needs to be maintained. And of course the alternative of the canvas awning is much more intrusive, both on the street and on the aesthetics of the facade.
Okay, we have another question. Commissioner Chen, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to clarify with the applicant, is the 12-inch depth of the canopy the minimal that you can extend out onto the sidewalk, is there, or is there another size that can be even thinner?
I think that our beams that are supporting the cantilever, I believe they are 8 inches. And you know, once you clad those with finished material, I don't know that we could get significantly under 12 inches. We might be able to get to, you know, 10.5 or 11 inches, but that's something I'd have to explore carefully.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, we're going to move to close this discussion and close the hearing and begin our discussion. So Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you like to start on this one?
Sure, thank you. I appreciate the historic account and explanation for the potential various thinking in terms of materials for the ground level. But change of heart or not, I think that any canopy, any intervention has to happen underneath the screen. That there isn't a chance in the world that Percival Goodman would have agreed to attaching something and at the dimension, both width and height, that this proposal does into the screen. It's so clear that the weight of the screen comes down so that it achieves this kind of, you know, almost a screen that's almost hit the ground, and that the whole area width of the building is meant to have whatever it has in it, but that everything has to happen in it. So there can be a variety of doors, there can be a variety of materials, there can be even canopies, although clearly it was not part of his thinking. He thought that, I mean, or the original design suggested that there could be a depth inside of that first level band. In other words, that that whole fabric could even move back into the space of the building to achieve an internal, in a sense, canopy quality of experience inside outside. But I think that the canopy as they propose it is absolutely unacceptable. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
I'm in total agreement with Commissioner Shamir Barron. Looking at this left-hand image, you see how strong that curtain, that concrete curtain is, or limestone curtain. And I think penetrating it will just really destroy the whole design concept of the building. I think that the increase in width of the doors is acceptable, and the change from transoms to louvers is acceptable. I feel like that still plays with the vocabulary of his ground floor infill, but I think a canopy would have to be somehow located within that ground floor below the masonry screen.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I also feel that the canopy really has to be lowered, that it appears to interrupt the facade and the impact of the building. It just really, and so I agree with the previous commissioners on that. And I also think that it probably should be less width toward the street, so that it would be, instead of a square, some kind of a rectangle. So that's my those are my principal concerns. The doors are fine. The other changes that they're making, like the mikvah door and so forth, are fine and in the right direction, I think. So I can approve the rest of it, but not the current canopy.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay. Well, as a guy who spent an awful lot of time looking at Percival Goodman's stuff, having worked on a Percival Goodman synagogue in the Bronx, I can say that the notion of an entry canopy per se is not alien to his work. And if you look at page 23 of the applicant's package, the next one after this, you'll see that his Fairmount Temple project had an entry portico. And the one that I worked on in the Bronx has a very dramatic, super macho entry portico, porte cochere almost. But in both cases, the support, the element is very much autonomous from the building to which it is fronting. It has its own very articulated columns. It has a shape and materiality that is different from the building to which it is fronting. So for all of those reasons, I think that a canopy or a marquee or something would be appropriate here. Take a look at top right corner, top left corner. Both of them are very consistent with the project that I worked on in the Bronx, which was another great, super cool Breuer-esque building. You know, if you look at Breuer's work in general, to which his work has a strong affinity, you see a lot of this kind of thing. But the entry elements are autonomous. They're pulled away, and they're not. You know, they don't really. You know, you're allowed to read the thing behind it very clearly. And I think in this case, where you have this incredibly charismatic, perforated, whack job wall of these eye-shaped openings, to violate that rectangle with this plane, I think is a mistake. So I agree with everyone else. Let's drop it down. I think that the width could remain the same width, but I think that you could explore having columns and having it to be a canopy instead of a marquee, which would allow you to vary the thickness. The reason it's so thick is because it's a cantilever. If it becomes a canopy, it doesn't have to cantilever, and it can be very thin. And in fact, there are buildings along Fifth Avenue that have entry canopies that are very architecturally distinct and that rely on their columns to create that autonomy. And you know, I guess the most dramatic example might be the entry pavilion at the Whitney, which is a similar kind of articulated element. I think that the choice of bronze has to be looked at a little bit carefully. It's very bright, and it's very clear from the architectural drawings and the original photographs that the intent of the base was to be, like Adi said, recessed, uniform, dark, floating. And I'm a little concerned that the bright bronze might be a little too bright. Maybe a medium or darker bronze would be more appropriate. I think toning it down a little bit would be something they should think about.
Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire.
I believe that Commissioner Goldblum's comments about the finish on the bronze are completely accurate. If it were smaller, it would not have to be as thick, but I also agree 100% that it has to drop below the screen.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I agree with all the comments that the commissioners have made. But overall, I must say on the ground floor, this is a very rational. I think the applicant did an excellent job in terms of the layout and the design, but I totally agree with all the commissioners' comments. I think the front curtain should not be violated, and that's what, and Commissioner Goldblum's point is well taken. I think if you were to drop below that curtain line, then the reason why it has to be so thick is obviously it's a cantilever. That projection into the lobby, if you were to go into the lobby and anchor it, it becomes a much more a technical issue. And I think that I have no problem with the size of the canopy. I think that the Commissioner Goldblum's suggestions are excellent.
Commissioner Bland.
In agreement. It must drop below. The screen is just inviolable.
The mute is over there.
No, I can't get this thing.
Sorry, somebody else is speaking.
Stopped it. So
okay.
All right.
Go ahead, Commissioner Bland.
Okay, sorry. So drop it. I don't think anybody's suggested choosing A or B in terms of the of the what you see when you look up, the reflected ceiling plan. I think the all glass scheme, the backlit glass scheme is wrong. It's just too much light. So I would favor the other one, but I do think the most important thing is to drop it down below. I'm not sure I would support the idea, even though Commissioner Goldblum has shown us reasons to suggest legs on this thing and make it thinner. Not sure that feels right to me, but in any event, I think the key is to just no violation of the concrete wall.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi? You're muted, Commissioner Lutfi.
Thank you. I concur with everything that my fellow commissioners have said. Canopy has to be lowered. I think the width should be restudied. I think the illumination issue needs to be looked at. I'm not sure if it needs to be illuminated, or if it is, it should be modestly illuminated. Otherwise, I'm okay with all the other changes at the base, the doors, the mikvah door, etc.
Okay. Great. Commissioner Jefferson?
My image is off.
Well, we can hear you if you.
Okay. I agree with my fellow commissioners, but I do think that if you lower it below the concrete wall, it has to be subordinate. It has to be quiet to fit into that slot, and not try to overwhelm this facade that has a lot of character. And I prefer not to have a canopy, but if you have to have a canopy, lower it, give it a total value that's quiet and almost no light, so that this character of this thing remains the same.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
This is such a unique building. You'd think it was an individual landmark, but it's not. And so there is leeway on the infill. Adjusting the doors the way they propose is appropriate, I think. There is certainly leeway to allow for a canopy. I think the current canopy is not so good, and happy to see it's going. I think that a new canopy is appropriate, but I do agree with all my fellow commissioners. The size, the lighting, the material, and the height of it make it look like the facade is actually torn between the two louvers.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I think we've had a very good discussion and some really helpful comments from the commissioners. And so I think what we'll do today is we will not take an action. We will leave it open. I think there has been a consistent expression of support for a canopy from most commissioners. But that the size, placement, materiality all need to be restudied. And so we'll ask you to work with the staff and come back when you have a revised design to propose to us. Thank you. And so we'll now move to the next and final hearing item. We were also going to do a public meeting item before lunch, but we're very behind schedule. So we'll just conclude the hearing agenda. Then we'll break for lunch, and we will begin the afternoon session with the public meeting agenda.
All right, commissioners, the next item is item number 6, docket number 20-08115, 163 East 67th Street. The Park East Synagogue, an individual landmark, Borough of Manhattan, Block 1402, Lot 30, an application for a certificate of appropriateness. A Moorish revival style synagogue building designed by Schneider and Herder and built in 1889 to 1890. The application is to install LED signage.
Commissioners, the applicants have joined the hearing. You now have control of the screen. Please state your name for the record and begin.
Hello, hi. My name is Dan. I'm representing Park East Synagogue. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right, so thank you for giving us the opportunity to hear our presentation today. Like she said, our project is located at 163 East 67th Street. It is an individual landmark, and our goal is to upgrade the existing signs along 67th Street to LED display signs. And we received community board approval for them last week and seek your approval now. The synagogue needs to update these signs because the existing signs are inefficient in providing updated information to the congregates. They need to show additional information such as COVID protocols, upcoming events, and unfortunately sometimes sudden passing of members and upcoming memorials to be held for them. So many congregates are elderly and they don't have email and they have no other way to be informed. So it will give the synagogue the ability to share information into the 21st century. So these are the existing signs along the street. Let's see, is this moving? Okay, here's the map of the boundary and the location of the synagogue, sandboard map. Try to keep this brief. I know it's extending a little longer. Here is the entrance along 67th Street, historical photos. That was the context of the street. Here are plans, the location of the signs from the basement level and the first floor level. A drawing of the facade and the location of those signs. Photos of those signs and the facade. Here are the two signs. It's a symmetrical building, so it's one's on the left, one's on the right. Here are the existing dimensions of those signs, and we will be using the existing mounting brackets to mount the new proposed signs. The new signs will be slightly smaller than the existing signs. They're highly customizable. They will be controlled via app. There will be a dimming plan at night. It has photo sensors to dim appropriately. It will be monochromatic, meaning in general, usually a black background with white text. Here are specifications of the unit we're proposing. And we explored several options with the electrician and the architect and found that the best solution to supply power to the unit would be a conduit, a direct path along the bottom edge of the baluster over there, resting on the brownstone molding detail you see in the picture. And we found that this path is the most direct and least intrusive option as it creates the fewest amount of penetrations. It's the shortest run of conduit, is the least visible option from the street, and would also be painted to blend in with that brownstone base. So a view from the street here, it would barely be visible being located at that ledge. So like I said, we're trying to maintain that current image we already have, as opposed to proposing a new location and patching up the existing holes if we were to remove those brackets, and then trying to treat and protect those openings from the elements. So we would be eliminating the need to repair that. And like I said, we already received unanimous community board approval, and that's the presentation. And thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? All right, not seeing any. Oh, one question. Commissioner Chen, please go ahead.
Yes, just a minor one. Is either a battery pack an option or?
Yes, there will be a battery pack located above behind, it will be very similar to the existing, where there will be a panel above, and the battery pack will be behind that signage.
And
So
the
like
follow-up
here.
to that is that the battery pack, the power is not adequate to whether supplemented by a slightly solar to power this.
We understand that it would not be a reliable way to supply power to the signs.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I was just wondering, and I understand why you're putting them back in the current location, but given that in part this is to, help people, congregants who might be elderly and, also who would be walking down the street normally before services or at other times, is there any location on the ground floor? I mean, before you would have to go up the steps where you might have considered putting these. Was there any thought about that? Is there anything?
Yeah, we explored several options, but like they said, they want to keep the current image of the existing signs and keep it where it is. But the other maybe possible alternative would be in front of these windows on the sidewalk, but we would be blocking those windows. There is a fire department connection, and we'd be blocking that. We just found that that's not a great solution. And like we said, we want to maintain that current image of the existing signs where they already are, without creating new holes, new mounting points, and patching up the old holes and trying to keep them resistant to the elements at the same time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
Diana stole my thunder.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to participate, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, we had 2 people sign up. I'm going to start with Friends of the Upper East Side.
Jim, just a minute, I want to make sure I'm not.
Okay, Laura, did you make it in?
Oh, hi. Can I be heard?
Yes. We can
Yeah.
Laura Variale, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Friends would like to commend the applicant for working with Community Board 8 and addressing the community's concern regarding the wiring of the proposed LED sign. While we understand the need for the congregation to update its methods of communication, we are concerned about the ongoing impact of these screens on the appearance of this individual landmark. We applaud the applicant for proposing a display that fits within the existing signs and coming up with a wiring solution that is minimally intrusive. But allowing the installation of 2 large LED screens opens the door for an infinite number of display possibilities on this residential street. While these displays have been proposed precisely for their graphic versatility, Friends Preservation Committee worries that it will be too easy for graphics to jeopardize the elegance of this building. We are aware that the congregation has presented a display intent that will consist of monochromatic text that will occasionally include muted colors and pictorial display, and that do not intend to display moving images such as videos. While Friends has no intent nor desire to regulate what the congregation will display on their signs, we ask that, if approved, the commission finds a way to limit the light intensity and color palette of the displayed content. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Kelly Carroll.
Okay.
Kelly Carroll, Historic Districts Council. While HDC does not object to the upgraded signage, this intervention is an opportunity to move the signs off of the building itself. And I did just hear Commissioner Chapin's comment, but we had the same thought. So I'll continue. The current signs interrupt the massive piers and reaching the steps, and conceal the brick course and carved brownstone. The proposal duplicates this condition, but with the addition of electrical conduits, which will further clutter the building's facade. HDC suggests exploring a new location off of the building's facade for these signs altogether, perhaps as a freestanding element at the sidewalk level. This placement would facilitate a better pedestrian awareness of events within the synagogue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any other hands raised.
And Rich, do we have any written testimony?
Do have a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 8 recommending approval.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'd like to turn back to the applicant and see if you'd like to respond to the comments we've just heard.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that we explored the other locations and that we don't feel that it is the best solution. As I said, it would be blocking those windows. The other possible location would be in front of those windows, where we'd be blocking this building standpipe, blocking light from entering those windows. We don't think that the conduit, adding a conduit, really is what we're doing. Is going to be abrasive to the facade at all. I don't think it would be visible, barely at all, on the street level. So
Okay.
that's what I have to
Great.
say.
And you also are not going to be proposing any moving images on these signs.
Correct. The synagogue is open to working with the community, and we want to please all the neighbors. They'll do whatever they have to.
Okay. Okay, any final questions, commissioners? All right, I am going to start requesting to unmute you so that we can close the hearing, make a vote on closing the hearing. Leffy, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as was presented, these are for signs that are slightly smaller than the existing signs, but to be mounted on existing brackets to not require additional damage into historic fabric. And in terms of the LED, we have approved for other religious institutions converting to an LED system that allows for ease in changing content. I know that there are questions about moving images. The applicant has stated that there will be no moving images. So with that, why don't we start our discussion? Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, I'm perfectly fine with this the way it is. Same size, same location. They're using the same openings to attach it, and I'm perfectly fine with it.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
I'm in agreement with that.
Commissioner Holford Smith?
I agree.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I do feel that the LED is appropriate here, and ideally it would be at a different location, but since they're replacing it at the same location, as long as the conduit can be concealed as much as possible, I think it's fine.
Okay, and Commissioner Goldblum?
I think it's a terrible location. It's in front of decorative stonework. There's clearly the place between the windows and the doors is a perfectly good place on the ground level. I mean, when we've approved these in the past, they've been in smooth locations, kind of less prominent locations. This kind of smacks you over the head when you see it. I mean, this building's an orgy of ornament and decoration, and it's kind of smacking you right between the eyes. I couldn't approve it.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire?
I agree with Commissioner Goldblum. It's anywhere but where it is going to be now, I think would be more appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Chen?
Given that the commission has approved these signs before, and it's just replacing it with a more flexible system, and the contour is minimally visible, will be blended in with new color, I think it is appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
Well, the Michaels threw me off. I was ready to ditto everybody else.
That's our job.
I know, and I salute you for it. But I think that since it's been here a long time and this is where the congregation wants it and the neighbors have approved it, I'll go along and say it's appropriate as is.
And Commissioner Lutfi?
I agree. It's appropriate.
All right, and Commissioner Jefferson?
I'll go with Commissioner Goldblum. I think it could be anywhere else. This is a very beautiful building. No.
Okay. All right, so we do have enough to vote to approve this. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you go ahead and make the motion?
In the matter of LPC 2008115, 163 East 67th Street, the Park East Synagogue, an individual landmark. The application is to install LED signage. I recommend approval, finding that the work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features, that the signs will replace existing signs of a similar size and at the same location, and the presence of signs of this size with changing information is in keeping with traditional signage typically found at religious buildings, that the signs feature LED technology containing programmable informational content, a modern version of traditional freestanding directories associated with religious buildings, that the proposed signs will reuse existing attachments with a minimal amount of conduit painted to blend with the surrounding masonry, that the programming will be limited to static images and a limited color palette, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the individual landmark.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, and Rich, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
I'm going to say nay, actually. I agree with the Michaels.
okay, Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Nay.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Nay.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Nay.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
Okay, with 7 in favor and 4 opposed, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Approved, thank you. All right, that concludes our hearing portion of the agenda today. We will now break for lunch and we will come back at 1:50 and we will begin with our public meeting agenda this afternoon. So we'll ask all members of the public to exit the meeting at this time so that you can rejoin if you want to participate or watch the meeting this afternoon. You can also watch our public meeting on YouTube. And commissioners, you just need to turn your audio and cameras off. And we'll see everybody in a half an hour at 1:50. Thank you. 1:55, let's say. It's 1:25 now. 1:55, we'll return. Thank you.
All right, there are no
Okay, I've
attendees.
stopped recording and I have locked the webinar.
Great.
Okay. All right, so we're way
My
behind.
voice sound funny. Are you hearing me clearly or am I breaking up? I'm okay.
I was hearing you clearly.
You sometimes sound, oh, I thought sometimes you sounded like a robot.
Oh,
Oh, really?
am I
didn't
sounding
hear that.
better now? Is it okay?
There
It's fine now.
fine, but sometimes Lisa sounded a little, there was a sound quality with her from my perspective, but anyway.
Oh, really? Shoot.
Contact
What did I sound like?
with you.
What, Sarah, what was wrong with mine? Was I robot or?
No, there was just that one time you were very, like you sounded 100 miles away, but I could hear you and I knew what you said. So it was when we were taking testimony and there was no testimony.
I think my AirPods died at that moment. So I think that, okay. Okay, good. At least I know when.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll pick up in a half an hour and do the public meeting agenda. All right, everybody go have lunch. See you soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, Sarah, I was sorry
Yes.
to switch horses, but I did, listening to the Michaels, I